Carly, would you like to start with introducing yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carly Willis. I'm with the Florida Center for Reading Research in Tallahassee, Florida. And I have been working here for about 13 years and have worked on many different projects where we researched different strategies to teach children language and vocabulary at this age. And am super excited to share all of the information with you today because we take all that we've learned over the last 13 years and created some great resources for all of you. Prior to working at the Florida Center for Reading Research, I was a classroom teacher for about 6 years. And I'm so glad that all of you could join us this morning. Thank you.
Kelly?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Shepard, and I have been working on this project with the FCRR and the REL group for just over 2 years. I worked with the FCRR back in 2010 or 2009 when I was living in Tallahassee. Since then, I left then to teach in the classroom for several years. And before my family have moved around a little bit. I'm actually coming to you this morning from Barcelona, Spain. So this has been our latest move that we're here. So I'm so happy that I can still be a part of this project. I'm really excited about all of the information that we get to go over today and hearing how things are going. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin Smith, and I'm the lead for training, coaching, and technical support for the Regional Educational Laboratory Southeast, which is a contract with the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm a former classroom teacher and the director of the Just Read Florida office at the Department of Education in Florida, and have a lot of experience training and working with elementary teachers, and I'm a former coach. So certainly appreciate your work as coaches and teachers, and I'm so glad to be here with you this morning. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you. Maureen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Kashchak, and I have been with FCRR for the last 18 years. I've worked on a bunch of different projects, and I also have done testing with in the schools, observations. So I'm happy to be part of this project as well and work with all of you. So welcome.
Thank you. Audrey?
Hi, I'm Audrey Romberg. I've worked for FCRR for 18 years. I'm supposed to be retired, but they asked me to come back for this project. And prior to that, I was a guidance counselor in Philly for a few years and a early childhood educator and director.
Thank you. We just couldn't do it without you. We had to get you back. Sarah?
Good morning. My name is Sarah Dvorak, and I've been with the FCRR since last August. Today I'm going to be the tech facilitator, so I'm excited to be able to help out today.
Thank you. And I am Emily Rains. I've been with FCRR since 2017. I've worked on a few different projects, and I'm excited to be on this one too. I'll be with you in one of the small breakout groups today too, and I'm looking forward to getting to work with you today. So this is our disclosure, and it explains that the information presented and the materials that are provided as resources to you. And this presentation and the instructional practices included are not intended to mandate, direct or control a state or local educational agencies or schools' content. We're providing this just as additional resources for you. This is our project overview and logistics. So since this is the first of several trainings, I wanted to share some information that we'll look at in more detail at the teacher and coach training. So hopefully this will give you more information about the project, so everything else we discussed today makes sense. But please keep in mind that some of this information may be repeated in the coach and teacher trainings as well. The pre-kindergarten and kindergarten language project's aims are centered around vocabulary and language. In working with OEL, we're seeking to better understand the Florida Early Learning and Developmental Standards, emergent reading, emergent writing, and the best kindergarten literacy standards. To this aim, we're ensured that our lesson plans are aligned with these standards. We also want to build teachers' and coaches' confidence in vocabulary and oral language instructional skills, improve children's oral language, teach effective oral language scaffolding techniques that will allow teachers and coaches to differentiate instruction and meet individual children's needs. So here is our project timeline. And please note that we have made adaptations from earlier project timelines. We converted in-person trainings to web-based trainings. In order to do this, we had to split up the amount of time we're in each webinar. So webinars will be 4 hours each. There will be 5 of these 4-hour webinars for teachers and coaches. Then there will be 2 additional 4-hour webinars for coaches only. And during these webinars, we'll help coaches better assist teachers in implementing these new instructional strategies. And this is the first of those coach-only, those 2 coach-only webinars. There'll also be coach-only support webinars each month starting in February. These 1-hour webinars will be for coaches to learn from each other how to better support their teachers. And it'll give you time to interact with other coaches and ask questions and kind of help each other out with this. So coach benefits, and by coach here, we're referring to people who directly work with teachers to implement these strategies and attend the trainings. The coaches' materials allow coaches to model lessons for teachers with their own materials and or reference the materials when working with teachers. The welcome packets will be included in your kits and they'll be mailed out this month. However, in the meantime, we're sharing a PDF version of the welcome packet for you to share with teachers who already signed on or with teachers who may be considering joining the project. The kits will be mailed out to coaches and coaches will need to deliver them to their teachers. At this kit delivery visit, you can talk about the project, build rapport, and start planning how the teachers will implement Module 1. Teachers actually receive everything that the coaches receive. The only difference between a coach kit and a teacher kit is the packaging. The coach kit comes in a blue REL Southeast tote bag, which allows coaches to carry these kits from school to school while visiting their teachers. The teacher kit comes in a box with a special label that says Tomorrow Box. This label should be affixed to the box and used to place all the items the teachers will need for tomorrow's lesson. And it can be used for any lesson, not just the lessons from the language and vocabulary project. We have used Tomorrow boxes in many of our research projects, and teachers always found these very helpful. It provides one designated place to have any books, activities, and lessons that you'll need for the next day's lesson. Teachers are strongly encouraged to attend the same training date and time as their coach. However, we understand that people's schedules are different and it can get complicated, so it's not a requirement. We also want teachers to register for their training dates as well. And we're sharing the link for participants to choose their training dates in the chat box. I don't know if we're actually doing that right now, but we've sent those links out and you can share those with your teachers. While administrators aren't directly involved with the implementation, we expect them to support the teacher's implementation of all 4 language and vocabulary strategies, particularly the small group instruction. We also expect them to allow the coaches to visit, model, and observe in the classroom. And we understand that with COVID restrictions, that might need to be virtually or whatever way we can, you can work that out with the teacher and the schools. As needed, administrators should also find a substitute for teachers to attend the professional development. Teachers will be expected to implement all 4 language and vocabulary instruction strategies, provide frequent small group instruction for dialogic reading implementation, complete online self-study through the website by watching implementation videos, and to actively engage with the coach including classroom observations, coach modeling, and feedback sessions. So we'll also have regularly scheduled webinars where coaches can talk with REL personnel to discuss unique and specific circumstances. And these are those 1 hour coach support webinars that we were talking about. And we will offer helpful tips for classroom implementation of the strategies during these webinars. And you can see Module 1, the support webinar will be in February, Module 2 in March, Module 3 April, Module 4 May, and we will send out, you don't have to register for these. We'll email out the link to you, and you can just join whatever date works for you. There will be 3 for each module.
Emily, I just wanted to go ahead and confirm that we did share the welcome packet in the chat box, and we also shared the link to register for the January and February training dates. So
Awesome.
those are
Thank
both in
The
chat
chat.
box.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So for coaching visits, and we know if you have other job responsibilities, this will influence how many visits you're able to pay for each teacher. The coach visits have an ideal pattern, including planning, observing, modeling, joint implementation, continued planning, and final observation. Ideally, we would expect a coach visit during each of the 5 sessions during each module. However, our key term for this program is that it's flexible. The flexibility of the program will allow coaches to tailor their interactions based on the needs of the teacher. A very novice teacher may need more modeling and thus more visits, while a more experienced teacher may need less visits and or more joint implementation to tweak his or her delivery. Coaching visits can consist of the following interactions: a coach demonstrating a lesson for a teacher, a coach observing teacher implementation, a coach conducting a feedback session with a teacher, a coach planning or discussing logistics with a teacher, and a coach answering any teacher questions about implementation or lesson plans. All right, so here's the coaching cycle overview. So over the course of this project, teachers will work through the 4 modules, learning the instructional strategies. Within each module, coaches will be systematically working through our coaching cycle to provide support to their teachers. The coaching cycle plan consists of 5 sessions to coincide with 5 coaching visits across 5 weeks per module. This is our ideal plan. This plan was ultimately designed to be flexible, like we talked about, and allow each coach and teacher pair to adapt the cycle to their needs. This means that a coach could theoretically conduct more or less visits depending on the needs, knowledge, comfort level, and schedule of the teacher. Additionally, we are fully aware that this year may just be disrupted and that all may not go as planned, but the goal is to train coaches for the long run so they can implement the more ideal versions in the future too. We're building capacity, not expecting full implementation from all this year. With that in mind, we're still training coaches in the same optimal coaching cycle as if it were any other year. So session 1 is goal setting and planning meeting. The purpose of this session is to complete an initial meeting with your teacher to discuss goals for the upcoming module. Session 1 could consist of the following: coach and teacher meeting, an introduction, review of the teacher's schedule and assisting with logistics. When can the teacher implement this new strategy and where in his or her schedule will it fit? Coach assisting with group selection. We'll talk about that in later modules. Discussion of teachers' personal learning goals, discussion of the student learning goals, and if teacher is not using the lesson plans that are provided by our project, the coach may assist in reviewing or creating lesson plans with the teacher. Session 2 is teacher implementation. The purpose of this session is for the teacher to implement the instructional strategy. During this session, the teacher is actively implementing the instructional strategy on her own. Session 2 would normally consist of coaches scheduling visits to observe teacher implementation, conducting feedback sessions, or offering teacher support if teachers have any questions during the week. If the teacher doesn't feel comfortable implementing during session 2, the coach can switch sessions 2 and 3. This way, the coach would model first and then observe the teacher in session 3. We designed the sessions with teacher implementation first so that the coach would be able to have an idea of the teacher's strengths and weaknesses going into his or her modeling session. This way, the coach could emphasize the aspects of the lesson where the teacher was particularly weak. For example, on session 2, if a teacher has poor behavior management, the coach during session 3 would come with many different ways and ideas of how to manage behavior during the modeled lessons. If, however, the teacher's weaknesses was on the lesson itself and providing child-friendly definitions, then this would be what the coach would emphasize during the modeled lessons. Session 3, model implementation. The purpose of session 3 is to provide an exemplar modeling session of the new instructional strategy for the teacher as a means of support and feedback. During session 3, the coach would plan to visit the teacher during her normally scheduled implementation time of the instructional strategy. The coach would then complete the following. Model the entire lesson that the teacher is currently using with her class, model a portion of the lesson that the teacher is currently using with her class, and model a new lesson. A feedback session should be scheduled for immediately after to highlight areas that the coach would like to draw the teacher's attention to. This feedback session can occur face-to-face or via email. Session 4, joint implementation. The purpose of session 4 is to assist and observe teacher implementation of the instructional strategy. Where needed, the coach can step in to model during problem moments. Session 4 allows for co-teaching to occur with the lesson. Additionally, there's flexibility in how the joint implementation can occur. Coaches should touch base with teachers and ask about their level of comfort when it comes to this session. From working with this project in previous years, we found that some teachers are more than comfortable with having coaches jump in mid-lesson, while others would prefer that there are assigned points, and others prefer that coaches only step in when asked. Session 5, sustaining implementation. The purpose of session 5 is to discuss and develop a plan that will allow teachers to continue implementation of the strategy throughout the year. With each module, our goal is to incorporate a new instructional strategy into the daily schedule. In order to accomplish this, teachers must have a plan on how sustaining implementation will be accomplished and what changes need to be made to their schedule. If available, discussions on how to better utilize an assistant, the session sets out to make this a reality. So here's our overview of instructional practices. Here are our 4 modules. Each module focuses on a component of oral language or vocabulary in a different setting within a preschool classroom. Some strategies are explicitly taught while others capitalize on incidental moments of a normal school day. So our module 1 is explicit vocabulary instruction. It focuses on vocabulary and word networks, and the setting is in whole group. Module 2 is explicit language instruction, focuses on expressive language, and we implement this during center time. Module 3, dialogic reading lessons, focuses on vocabulary and expressive language, and the setting is daily small groups. And Module 4 is incidental language instruction, and it focuses on expressive language, and the setting for implementation is throughout the day. Are there any questions at this time before we move on to our next presentation? All right, Maureen, you're not seeing anything in the chat?
So now for this part of the training, I will be talking more about or give you a little bit more coaching specific or a little more information about Module 1 and Module 2. Again, here's our disclaimer that you'll become very familiar with. We just saying that all of the information and materials that we present and share are not meant or intended to mandate or direct or control any other curriculums or anything that the teachers are expected to teach and use within their classrooms. So Module 1, and Emily just went very quickly over all 4 of the modules, so I'll focus more on some specifics for Module 1 and Module 2. Module 1 is the explicit vocabulary instruction module, and this is where the teachers will do just that. They will give explicit instruction on explicit vocabulary targets. So we have 3 different activities that, and I know that some of you may have already attended the first training with teachers. And so a lot of this will be refreshing your memory from not that long ago. So we're hoping to just kind of build on what you've already been introduced to today and kind of clarify anything and give you some ideas on how you can coach the teachers to better understand and better implement each of these activities. So for Module 1, like I said, there's 3 different activities. Those are the network lesson, the category and sorting lessons, and the book embedded vocabulary instruction lessons. So some of the specific things for each of these lessons are written and intended to be taught in a whole group lesson. However, that being said, for teachers that have the opportunity or would like to have a smaller group or a half size, that is also okay. But when we wrote the lessons, they were written with the intention that you could do it whole group and in like a circle time kind of meeting together. Each of the lessons teach specific words, and each of the lessons will teach kind of focus on words within categories or within semantic networks. So each one of the lessons gives the teacher an opportunity to discuss some of the links between those words and how they are connected to each other. And then we engage kind of that rapid learning of new connected words or new category words. So the first activity in Module 1, the network lesson. So the goal of this lesson is that it helps the children to form and explore connections between words. So like I said, that is the focus for all 3 of these are going to give children an opportunity to kind of make those connections. So in the network lesson, children form and explore a connection between words, and they discuss and describe how those words are connected. This activity engages children in multiple ways, and the teacher will be creating a word web. And so there'll be a target word, and there's a good discussion around all of the words that kind of are connected with that target word, and then gives the children an opportunity to express kind of their understanding, and the teacher an opportunity to describe how those are all connected. So this is an example. This is a word web breakdown. So when we say a word web, they'll have their chart paper and they have the target word in the middle. So, and this is an example that we've compiled from one of our teachers that we were observing. The teacher had written with markers on the chart paper. And so this was kind of how the conversation went with her students. So the goal of the word web is that it uses the opportunity to expose and to teach children new words. It's also pulling from the students' own understanding. If they see the target word here is space, then they are prompted to think of any word that they can think of that might go along with that target word. The teacher also has some more sophisticated words or other words that are connected to that target word kind of tucked in their back pocket so that they can pull those out and introduce maybe some new vocabulary to the students. And then to also, by introducing some of the words that the teacher provides, then hoping that that kind of helps the children to generate even more words. One thing that we want to encourage our teachers to do with this lesson is to be sure to discuss all of the connections with each of the words that either they provide or that the children provide, that they take a moment to discuss how each of those words are connected to the target word. It just to help build their understanding and kind of bringing it back each time to that target word. So in this example, the teacher would have introduced to space as their word of the day or the word they're going to focus on for this activity. And then maybe some of the children came up with some of the other words that they think of when they think of the word space. And so if one of the students would say earth, that's right. And you can take a moment to say, that's right, earth is a part of space and we live on the planet Earth and it is all a part of the space, and kind of bring that back to the target word so that they're kind of building on those connections or their understanding. One of the things that we would also point out with this, so if you look at some of the examples here, we have some kind of off to the side, and you can see how this was a conversation where the teacher was being very careful to include all of the ideas that the children were sharing. So with the network lessons, a lot of times it's most likely going to happen that you'll get those off the wall kind of answers. They feel off the wall to the teacher. They're maybe not sure what connection the child is having. So I feel like if my youngest son was a part of this activity and someone said space, he might say king, because he just recently read a book called The King of Space, and it was all about a little boy wanting to be the king. And so that is an example of how you might get things coming out. We've had another story shared of students or a child saying dog, they're making connections and they're on the right track because we're making connections. And so the next part of that, when we have those types of answers being called out, is that the teacher would take a moment and ask the child, oh, how is dog connected with space? Or how is being a king connected with space? And give the child a moment to express why their connection is correct. And so we encourage the teachers and want to encourage the teachers to be sure to include all of the examples that they're being given during this activity, as long as they can find that connection and find that explanation as to how it comes back to the target word. So now we're going to watch a network lesson being taught in the classroom, and then we'll come back to this lesson. Is one of our teachers, that Miss April, and we will actually be watching this again in our breakout groups in a little bit later, in a little bit. And so we're just going to watch the whole thing through now, just to give you an idea as to what these lessons look like in real life.
One quick thing to note while Kelly is pulling up the video is, in order to make sure that this activity is developmentally appropriate for pre-kindergarten and kindergarten children, our focus is not on writing words. The teacher can certainly write words to remind herself of what words are on the chart, but the better way to represent the words for the children is to either draw pictures or have pictures printed out that you can cut out. We also, for our lessons, provide you some sketches that you can print out and tape onto your word web. So making sure that you do it in a developmentally appropriate way so that there's not a lot of stress on the children to sound out the word, because that's veering away from the focus or the key elements and principles of this particular lesson in this particular project.
Thank you for saying that, Carly. That didn't dawn on me. The example, the slide just before this one, this is not what it looks like when the teacher created it. It had stars drawn on it and little moons, and there were planets. And so she had sketched out quickly some of the ideas that the students were coming up with. And so just a few of these that she actually write the word, or she either would do a quick sketch to go with it. So that's an important point to make, that it's not a phonics or spelling lesson.
And, again, the focus is always on the language and the conversation and the vocabulary. And so if you're saying to yourself, well, I can't draw, like, how am I going to do this lesson? You can draw a horrible version of an astronaut, like a little stick man with a helmet on his head, and then talk about how I know that this is an astronaut, even though it doesn't look like an astronaut because he has a helmet, because astronauts have to wear a helmet because they can't breathe in outer space. And so your bad drawing can also lead to lots of discussions about why it's representative of the thing that you're trying to convey. So don't be scared that, you're not an artist, so you can't do this.
Great, thank you. Okay, I believe it's working now. Let me know.
Today we're going to talk about a special word.
Do you hear? Can you hear? Okay.
Saturate. When you saturate something, that means it's really, really wet. It's filled with water. Okay? So we're going to think of other words that relate to our word saturate. Okay, can you think of any words that relate to our word saturate? Saturate, remember, is when it's filled with water and you can't put any more water into something or anything that's moist. It's completely saturated. That means nothing else will fit in it. It is really, really wet. Can you think of other words?
Pond.
A pond. That's a good word. How does that relate to it? Why did you think of the word pond? What made you think of a pond?
I know that.
Is a pond wet? Has water in it? Yeah. Anybody else?
A river.
A river. Very good. A river is a place that is saturated with lots of water. We're going to make a river flow like this. How about that? Anybody else?
I know.
What?
A waterfall.
A waterfall. Very good. We can say waterfall. What's a waterfall, Ellery?
It comes down to another waterfall that comes down to the river.
Uh-huh. It's water that comes from way up high. See, here's way up high. It's falling onto the rocks. There's our waterfall. Very good. Anything else come to mind?
River.
A river, a pond, a waterfall. What about this?
A puddle.
It's a puddle. What's happening?
Jumping.
Jumping in a puddle. Do you think if you jump in a puddle that you might get wet? If you jump in it hard enough, you might even be a little saturated. So let's put jumping in a puddle. Is also connected to our target word, saturate. Anything else? Need a little help? Look. What about this guy? I don't think he was in in a puddle. Looks like he was maybe in a rainstorm. He is soaking wet. Do you know what it's called when someone is soaking wet? We can say they are drenched from head to toe. And that is also like saturated. He is drenched in water. So he has been saturated with something. He's drenched. Anything else that you can think of that has to do with saturate?
A duck pond.
A duck pond? Yes.
When you put you jump in down and you're tired.
Yeah, you might get tired. That's right. If you jump in a puddle long enough, it's gonna make you tired from jumping.
And it made me tired when I was in the puddle.
You got tired when you were in the puddle? What is this?
Washing dishes.
Washing dishes.
I
Do you think
help my mama wash dishes.
you do?
My mom don't let me.
When you wash the dishes, what happens? Do you saturate the dishes in the sink with water? Put them in a bunch of soapy water, right? So that's related to our word saturate. So washing the dishes is an event. That's something that we do to saturate the dirty dishes so we can get them clean. Let's try this.
We can eat.
Yeah, so we have something clean to eat on.
I'm
You know what this is?
hungry. A pond.
It is kind of like a pond. This is a
River.
This habitat is called a wetland. And a wetland is an area of land that's saturated with water. It's kind of like a swamp. I think another word for wetland
It's
could
river.
probably be the swamp, because it looks kind of like the swamp that we saw in our book earlier. Okay?
That
So
looks like it's fun.
you think it'd be fun to be here or here? Jumping? When we do jumping in the puddles?
No.
No. What about this word? You know what this word is?
Cactus.
This is dry. It is a cactus, and where cactuses live, it's very, very dry. So, Ellery, when something is dry, is it saturated with water?
No.
No. This is opposite of saturate, right? It is.
There's bubbles.
What are these? No, these are rocks. Okay, so this word dry is very opposite of saturate. There's nothing wet about the desert or other dry areas. Ellery, sit up for me, please. Okay, so this is opposite of this. Saturate means to be filled with water, and dry means no water at all, right? So that's the opposite. So it still makes us think of things that are opposite.
That looks like the sun field.
Are there any other words you can think of that have to do with the word saturate?
A swimming pool.
A swimming pool. Very good. Why?
Because you want to swim.
Because you want to be saturated in water if you're in a swimming pool. Huh?
I was in a swimming pool.
Very cool. I like that. That's a really good one.
I like
That is a place we can go to get saturated.
Great. Were there any comments or any questions about anything that we noticed there? We will be coming back to use that same video in our first breakout group in just a little bit, and where you'll have an opportunity to watch that same one and from a coaching perspective and kind of pause and kind of talk about some of the things that you're seeing Miss April do during that lesson.
There were a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to clarify
Okay.
before we move on. Should it include both words and pictures? I know the teacher's doing both in the video, and you are correct. She was doing both. it definitely needs to at least include pictures so that the children can follow along. It is up to the teacher if she wants to also add the words to help aid in her memory, which I would probably have to do because I can't remember 2 seconds later what I just did. So, so I would recommend that, you write very small, the word, and then more focus on the picture, make that larger and more clear to the children to see. And then is there a goal range amount of words to include with this activity? And this will be a pattern that you hear throughout this project, throughout this module, is it's more about the conversation that takes place since our focus is on language and vocabulary. It is more about the language and vocabulary and the conversation that surrounds the word than hitting a certain mark, right? And so if you have a really engaging lesson and only get 3 words on your word web, but you have great conversation and all of the children are engaged, then that's a successful lesson. If you get 20 words on your word web and the lesson lasts for 20 minutes and the kids are all over the place and they're rolling around on the floor and they're not paying attention at all, then that's not good, right? And so it's less about the number of words and more about the quality of the conversation that surrounds the word and having the children tell you why this word connects. And if they can't verbalize it, you modeling for them, this is why the word connects to the center word, right? And so, and one other thing that we like to say throughout this whole project is no lessons for this age group should ever last past 20 minutes max, ideally like 15 minutes. And so, but this is the nice thing about this lesson that I love, is you can do 10 minutes of it, get 3 words on, and then come back later or another day or even next week and continue the conversation and add more words. So it's this ever growing, ever building word web, this live document really for the children. And so no specific range of words, although I could definitely see a teacher going into the lesson having like her center word and then maybe like 1 word or 2 words that she really wants to make sure get on there because maybe we're going to read a book about it later or we're going to do an activity about it later. And so having a couple words in your back pocket that you really want to make sure you hit is perfectly fine. But not a specific amount of words. Like we can't stop until we hit 15 or something.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Carly. Okay, so now I'll move on to the second activity and still in module 1. So the second activity is the category lesson or it's a sorting lesson. So the goal of the category lesson is that we want to increase the children's vocabulary depth and breadth by grouping words in various categories based on their meaning. So this activity is going to engage the children to sort some familiar and some new words into different categories, and then to discuss why they belong in each category. And then also included with this activity is a game where they kind of come back and revisit which words go within each category. So I'm sorry, I'm saying category a lot, but it is the name of it, and that is what they'll be doing in the whole lesson. So, so this is a little bit, oh, sorry, I'm moving to the next slide. Here we go. So this is what the first part of a lesson plan looks like for the category lesson. And each of the lessons have 2 main portions. So first, the teacher will go through and define the actual categories. So in this example here on the PowerPoint, there are things that they're going to go through and talk about things that are gigantic and things that are tiny. So the first part of the lesson is the teacher will just spend a few moments defining what it means to be gigantic, what it means to be tiny, and then we'll spend a few moments going through each individual category separately. Not really. We want to be careful and not hop back and forth between the two categories at the very beginning when they're coming up with ideas or sharing ideas that belong, because that is what the children will do when we get to the what's your sign game. So while the teacher is defining the categories, they'll discuss certain things that what do you think is gigantic, or what are some things that you know are gigantic, and then they'll gather a few ideas from the children, talk about why they are gigantic, maybe and include a fun fact. Our lesson plans provide the teacher with some examples. They can certainly add to these to outside the lesson plan, whatever the children are sharing, and have discussions around about whatever the children are sharing and how they belong into the category. Our lesson plans that we've provided include several things that belong in each of the categories. And with each one, we've included a fun fact, not really a definition, but just kind of something fun to know about a whale or something that's tiny, shrimp, or something that I was trying to remember the lesson plan for a moment. But so the teacher will take a few minutes and talk about all the things that they can think of and kind of make a good list of things that we know are gigantic. And then we'll switch to the next category. Now let's talk about tiny. What are some things that we know are tiny, and allow the children to give some answers. The teacher can also provide some answers and those fun facts. And then they will move on to the second part of the lesson plan, which is the what's your sign game. And so for this part of the lesson plan, the teacher will introduce a gesture to go with each of the categories. And so in this case, if they're doing gigantic, they want to add that gesture for the children. And then tiny, or they might have a little symbol for tiny that they're introducing. So now the children have these gestures that they can also make to go with the vocabulary that will be shared when they play the what's your sign game. So when the teacher then moves on to that, that she might introduce and say, I'm going to say a word and I want you to tell me if it's gigantic, or I want you to tell me if it's tiny, and then can go through some of the words that they have come up together, and maybe some of the new ones that the children give the children a moment to kind of think about, is it gigantic or is it tiny? And the children make the sign for that. They can say gigantic or tiny, of course, but if the teacher says whale, what's my sign? I'm a whale. What's my sign? And she's really waiting to see the expressive part, how the children are making the gesture, if they're making the tiny gesture or the gigantic gesture to go along with the sorting part. For this activity, and we're going to view a category lesson in just a second. And the teachers, again, have the option to include photographs or include chart things with our lesson plans that for the category lessons. This is very much kind of an oral lesson. It can like a circle time or a little carpet chat. I know that will look very differently in this school year. So but it's meant to just be kind of an open conversation. So there aren't specific sketches or illustrations, or the teacher's not having to write anything down unless they choose to. So it's really just getting the children to use those gestures to sort the vocabulary that they've been introduced to or they've discussed into the category that it belongs in. So now we'll move and we'll watch one of these lessons being done.
Today we are going to be talking about fresh and salt water. In our last unit we learned about the ocean, right?
Yeah.
The ocean is made of what type of water?
Fresh.
Salt water. Close, but salt water. It's made out of salt water, right?
Salty.
Mm-hmm. Now we're going to be talking about wetlands, which are made up of fresh water. Okay? Kenzie, can you sit up for me, please? Thank you. Some plants and animals like fresh water more than they like salt water. Like cattails, for instance, grow in freshwater wetlands, and anemones grow in salt water. Now that we talked about fresh and salt water, let's play a game. And our game is called What's Your Sign? Okay? Animals and plants that like fresh water have a sign. What is our sign for fresh water?
Drink.
And plants and animals for salt water, what is the sign for that one?
Bill.
I want you to do it, not just say it, okay?
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to name a plant and animal. Oh, let's time out. Let's start with an animal. Sorry, I just read that. Okay, you guys ready? I am a shark. What's my sign?
Salt water. Salt water.
So what do you do? What's his sign for salt water?
Splash.
So let's see everybody do it. Let me see you do it, August. What, baby? Nemo did swim in the salt water with the sharks. That's right.
Because Dory was finding Dory on the shark.
All right. I am a beaver. What's my sign?
My
Are you sure? Have you seen a beaver when you go to the beach? No.
Fresh.
So it's fresh. What do we do with salt water? Fresh water. We can drink it, right? Did you know that beavers, those two front teeth, well, they're orange like James's shirt? Did you know that? James's shirt is the same color as a beaver's front teeth.
I'm a tree frog.
I'm a tree frog. If a tree frog, they normally live, let's see, there is water. They do like water, but they do live in trees, which is why they are tree frogs. But what type of water do you think a tree frog would like to be by? Leon?
Fresh.
Can we get somebody besides Gabe? Is Gabe the only one that came to school today? What type of water would tree frog like, JD? What do you think?
Salt water.
Salt water? Would you see a little green tree frog at a beach?
It's a fresh water.
It's a fresh water. What do we do with fresh water?
You drink
You
it.
drink it. Let me see you drink that water.
But you keep pretending.
It's just pretend.
Great. Oh, sorry. There we go. Were there any questions? I was just reading some of the thoughts in the chat, and I'm seeing that one, I'm excited to see that so many people are also excited about these lessons and would like to adapt them to older children. Yes, I would. I was just reading a few. Let me make sure if that was the last one. I can't see all of the chat, so let me know if I missed anything. But yes, there are a lot of these, especially the network lesson, that I am a big fan of graphic organizers. I think they help me so much, and especially the teacher. And I have used them. I've taught up to 6th grade, and I've used them with at any time. Anytime I had students and we all kind of needed to organize some information and kind of keep track of where our thoughts were, where the lesson was going, or especially to introduce a new thematic unit or new things that we, and like Carly said, it's a living document that then we would hang in the classroom somewhere and add to and come back to, and children could go and often do reading and go and do some more research, and then would come back with more ideas to add to that chart. And so it was always a really important piece of whatever it was we were studying. So yes, any one of these lessons, I'm sure that could be adapted. The category lesson is a sorting one. You could do that. We've had teachers and coaches share that they have teachers who would take these and not even categories from our lesson plans. This is definitely an adaptable lesson that a teacher, once they kind of get very used to and comfortable with the structure of how you kind of pick two categories. Let's think of animals that live on the farm. Let's think of animals that live in the desert, and can kind of gather, it can become a very quick activity that can be done not even during circle time or during transition time or at the end of the day when you kind of have a few spare minutes here and there. Is there anything else to? Carly, do you see Renee's comment? The concern, I'm sorry, my chat is half hidden by my thing, so I can't. I see it, Renee. Oh, that they are not, that they kind of would lack. Are you thinking, I'm assuming you're thinking maybe like background information or books are picked. Is
Yes,
this in particular to the category lesson or the network or either?
I was thinking about the category lesson.
Okay. So you may have, I think that, again, this is one of those things, like I said, we don't provide the sketches and things for this, but you could tell, you might have noticed Miss Tamaya in the video, she knows her children, she kind of knows where they're at, and she had some little pictures of some of the words that she was helping to give kind of that visual aid to the students as she went over. For each of these, our goal is we want to kind of generate all of those words. And so we don't provide them because we want to give the opportunity for it to just go where the children are leading it to go. Does that make sense? So they're sharing what they do know. They're sharing when they're thinking of things that are gigantic or things that are tiny, they might say monster truck, or they might say something that is connected to where they are, what their background knowledge might be. And so that is, sorry, my computer was trying to restart. No. Okay, I think we're okay. And so I think with books or pictures, it could be a teacher-based preference. So if the teacher wants to prompt the children to remember the book we read the other day, you might remember that we read a book about the polar bear. Would the polar bear be gigantic or would they be tiny? And they could, and they could provide pictures if they want to. Of course, they can extend it to that.
The other thing to note here is, we're really big on themes in this project, and all of the lessons and materials that we provide for you are centered around different habitats as themes. Mm-hmm. And so the idea would be that you had spent a week or two or more on the ocean's habitat, for instance, building their schema, right? And they would have all of these words. Maybe they built the network lesson. They did the network lesson already and they built a word web. And so now they have some words, and the teacher added some new words to the network, right? The children add words to the network, and then remember also the teacher is going to add words, and so she's added words. And then, like Kelly said, if we're doing gigantic and tiny and the children come up with monster truck and, you know, an ant on the ground, but you're really wanting to guide them to the theme that you're working with, like ocean, then, you know, you value that, you affirm their input, and then you have in your back pocket some ocean animals that are gigantic and tiny, and maybe pictures to go with them. So you're including them in the activity, you're letting them have input and following their lead, but then you're also exposing them to these new words, because now I get a turn, right? So the teacher gets a turn. So I'm going to show you this new word, this beluga whale. He's gigantic. Everyone say beluga whale. And so then once you get to the what's my sign game, you're going to first sort, you know, monster truck, and they're going to say gigantic. And then you would then add, you know, beluga whale and who remembers, and see if they've got it. And at that time, you can take out the picture again. Remember the beluga whale? We talked about him, and he's really big and white, and blah, blah, blah. And so you're instructing as you're going too, right? And it, you know, you can read the books before. I see, I feel like a lot of you here that are asking questions are just like me, like you want the rules. I'm a rule follower. So like, tell me the order and exactly how I need to do it. You know, you can read books before. I think that if I were doing a theme, I would probably start the theme by reading some books and exposing the children just to the theme and what we're going to be talking about. Maybe watch a video about it, you know, those types of things, and then going into these more specific activities. But, you know, you could certainly make it work without doing that. By doing kind of what I just said, you know, your turn, you're teaching them words that are more theme specific, or and going back to the freshwater and saltwater activity, you know, that one is slightly different than the gigantic tiny lesson, right? Because most children can identify with big and small and come up with something that would sort into big or small, right? Saltwater and freshwater, again, would be something that they would have to have learned, right? So that particular sorting activity might be saved till the end of my ocean theme, because I do have to teach them about what saltwater is and what freshwater is and what animals live in those things. So I couldn't use that one without first establishing and spending some time on animals that go into those categories. Otherwise, the whole lesson would be super confusing to the children. But one like gigantic and tiny, or animals that fly versus animals that crawl, those types of sorting can be done without a lot of pre-teaching, right? And then remember, as you're doing the activity, you can also be teaching as you go through the activity. Does that all make sense?
I think so. Yeah. This is helping us a lot to know kind of, so I appreciate all the questions kind of popping up, and we're happy to address those as they come up. So, so I will move on to the third activity of Module 1. And so one thing that we do, I think is important to point out, because we had some questions about, have they read books before they do the category? These 3 activities do not have a particular sequence. So once the teacher is familiar with the steps and how to implement it, if they want to start, if they want to jump in and do a bevy lesson, a book embedded vocabulary instruction lesson, from the beginning, because they want to use one of the books that they've received with the project, and they want to kind of introduce the theme and some of the vocabulary that way. Great. That again, it's left up to teacher preference. And so I will go on and talk about some of the specific things for the third activity. So I'm going to shorten it to BEVI because it's a bit of a mouthful. But the goal of the BEVI lessons is to incorporate explicit vocabulary instruction within a large group shared book experience. And I'll go through kind of the breakdown for this one. So the BEVI lessons, and again, if you've already participated in one of the other trainings, you might have already heard some of this information. So each of the BEVI lessons have these 5 essential steps when it comes to implementation. So the pre-planning part requires the teachers to select an age or a developmentally appropriate book that they want to use for the shared book reading. So it's not necessarily read aloud. We want them to do it. There's a little bit of pre-planning that goes into the BEVI lesson. So we want them to review the book and select the target words that they want to teach throughout the lesson. And the words that they should select are words that you can find in the text, but also in the illustration. And that's going to be an important part when we get to the pre-teaching and the encounters. So after they've chosen the book and they've decided on the vocabulary that they would like to focus on during this lesson, then they would move on, or the first experience that the children have with the book. And I have my prop here. That's why I keep picking it up, but it's not a teacher habit, but the pre-teaching part is this is a novel and very important piece of the BEVI lessons because and something we say, don't skip the pre-teaching, because the teacher will take the book and have their vocabulary words chosen with their child-friendly definitions. And before they ever read the book or talk about anything about what the book is about, they would just flip to the pages where that target vocabulary is, and they would pre-teach, and they would just point it out in the illustration. So this one would be in the illustration, and give the definition of that, have the children say what that word, and that is just, they're going to pre-teach all of that, their target vocabulary that they've chosen, just to get it started, so that when they get to the third step or the first encounter, then they have a kind of a jumping off point. They can recall back and say, that's one of our new words, and the first encounter and the second encounter is just going to be the actual shared reading part. So during the first encounter, they're reading the book as a normal read aloud, and they're pausing when they get to a point or a place where they encounter one of their target words, either in the text or in the illustration. For most of the lessons, I believe usually the first encounter might show up in the text, or it might be similar to or it might be the page that they use to pre-teach, so they may have already seen it there. If it's not in the text, it'll be somewhere on the page where they can circle it with their finger in the illustration and bring everyone's attention back to that. So they have the first encounter where they are reading it in the text, and then could continue on with the read aloud and hopes that, and then get to the second encounter where they would then do the same steps again. They would say, oh, that's one of our new words. And they would draw the attention back to either if they heard it in the text or if they see it in the illustration, give the child-friendly definition of what that target word is, have the children say it, and then continue on with the reading. The fifth part of the BEVI lesson is a shared writing experience. So after, and we'll watch some videos of some of these being done, because because it's a little more in depth and it's a full kind of read aloud. It is a lesson where a lot of times teachers might pause in the middle of a book and come back to it the next day, because remember, we get to that 15-minute mark and we want to kind of start wiggling or start getting up and moving around. So because it does involve a whole pre-teaching piece and then reading a book and pausing to discuss a little bit more, it does tend to be a lesson where teachers prefer to pause after a certain point and then pick up with the same book or the same and continue to read the rest of it the next day. As well as with the shared writing experience, that can also be a separate activity or a separate 15-minute little block. So for the shared writing experience for the children, the teacher just takes, and again, we're coming back to another graphic organizer. They're taking what they've learned and talked about in these book encounter or the word encounters as they've shared this book, and they're going to talk about and make a chart, if the teacher chooses, kind of a T-chart, to share what they've learned from the book, and then anything else that they would like to find out. That maybe any questions they're not sure, any off the wall ideas that we want to include, anything the children says, we're going to put that up there too and find out the answers to those. So those are the 5, and I'll go, here's just a few more specifics. So like I said, they've carefully chosen the books, and we want for each of the words to be in the text and illustration. So in this example, what are landforms? The teacher wants to teach the target word island. So before they've read the story, they have, this is a brand new book, the teacher would turn to page 5 where you see this illustration and would just say, this is an island, and would point it out. So no text yet or anything, the word is there, but we're kind of pointing to the illustration where it's represented and giving the child-friendly definition. So this is an island. An island is land that has water all around it. And then would have the children say, can everyone say island? And then the children would say island. And then the teacher could go on and do the same steps and pre-teach the other vocabulary words. Then when the students come back, or when the teacher comes back and they're then doing the shared reading, the teacher could get to page 8 and be reading the text and read how it says, islands can be found in oceans, rivers, and lakes. At that point, the teacher would then pause and say, oh, I heard one of our new words, and then take a moment to say, remember, an island is a piece of land with water all around it. Everyone say island. And then could continue on. And that would be the first encounter. So then just continue. And like I said, if they're reaching the 15-minute, 20-minute mark and want to pause maybe the next day, or if they have time, they want to keep going. The page 13 is an example of where they would encounter the word island for the second time. So the top of the mountain that's seen above the water surface becomes an island. And so they can pause again. They heard it in the text. They can make sure to refer to this illustration where it's being represented here. And then they would say again, remember, it's land with water all around it. Everyone say island. And so the reason that we want to make sure to use each of the illustrations or each of the pictures here is because when we're teaching vocabulary and we're using books, we want to really take advantage of the pictures as a teaching aid to help bring that new vocabulary word to life, right? So one thing to consider is that the children, they might not know the word, or they might not know what the actual object is or the action. And so we want to really draw attention to, as we're saying, or encourage the teachers to, as they're saying the definition, really pointing it out in the illustration and taking advantage of those. Oh, sorry, I had 2 more circles on there. So now we're going to watch a bevy lesson being done. This is one of our teachers using the Wetlands book, and we'll watch this.
We're going to learn some new words today, okay? Look at this picture. This is a picture of a wetland, but this land is damp, okay? Damp means a little wet. Do you see how this land is a little wet? Our next word is shallow. Shallow means not deep. Look at this picture. Is the water deep on this picture?
No.
No, so we can say that land is shallow, okay? Right. Here, these are mangrove trees. And mangrove trees usually grow in salty water. Say salty. Salty means that the water tastes like salt. So mangrove trees like salty water.
So the salty water gets on the mangrove trees and grow it?
Yeah, I
Oh,
think.
so you mean like use the water to water it and then the tree just grows by itself?
Yep, the tree grows by itself. What do we need for plants to grow?
Water.
We need water. What else do we need?
Seeds.
Seeds. And we need what else?
Pot.
Well, we don't have to have pots. The land can be used as a flower pot, right? But we also need something that comes from the sky. And it's bright and the sunlight. So,
rain.
Oh, rain is water, right? Our story is Wetlands by Quinn Arnold. Quinn is the what?
Author.
The author. And the author writes the what?
Words.
The author writes the words. All right, let's
Or you
read.
can paint the words.
Hmm?
Or you can paint the words.
Well, you can paint the words, but most of the time an illustrator paints the pictures in the book, right? All right. Hello, wetland. Look at this picture. This ground is damp. Do you see it?
But it's wet.
Yeah, because it's a little wet. And damp is one of our new words, right? Say damp.
Yeah.
Damp means a little wet. Wetlands are large, damp areas. What do you see? Damp. Very good. Our new word. Damp means a little wet. Say damp. Damp.
I know the green ones are our words.
You think the green words are our words? We'll see. Some have salty water. Others have fresh water.
Salty.
Very good. Our new word, salty. Say salty. Salty means that the water tastes like salt. Many plants and animals live in wetlands. Moss grows on the trees. Great blue herons wade in shallow waters. Shallow, very good. Shallow is one of our new words. Say shallow.
Shallow.
Shallow means not deep, right? This is a picture of a heron. Say heron. And a heron is a type of bird. What are some other animals you think lives in the wetlands?
Turtle.
A turtle.
Alligator. Fish.
Fish. What are some other animals?
Monkeys.
If you think monkeys live in wetlands, do monkeys live in wetlands?
Shark. And the water sharks.
You think sharks live in the wetland?
Okay.
Sharks do live in water, but they live in the ocean. Yes, they live in the ocean.
I got split
So,
today.
fish, small fish live in the wetland, right?
Yeah.
Do you think snakes are in the wetland?
Yeah.
I think so. I think maybe snakes live in the wetland.
Are no.
Salty wetlands have mangrove trees. Did you hear a new word? Salty. Very good. Salty means that the water tastes like what?
Salt.
Tastes like salt. Crocodiles lie in the sun. Fish swim in the warm water. Tall cattails grow in freshwater wetlands. Frogs leap onto lily pads. They look for bugs to eat.
Ew. Favorite.
That's not my favorite animal. Is that your favorite animal? I don't know. It's not my favorite animal. You do. Wetlands are found in many places on Earth, Some are always covered with water. Others flood each year. What do you think these birds are doing?
Watching for food.
Watching for food. What kind of food do you think they're looking for?
Fish.
Fish. Are they looking for fish in the sky?
No.
Where do fish live?
In the water.
In the water. So they're waiting for fish to what?
Jump out.
To jump out or to swim by, right? What do you think they're gonna use to get the fish?
Beak. Their beak.
Their long beaks. Yes.
Like
Look at this turtle.
He's hiding.
It's hiding. Why do you think this turtle is hiding?
So he can get ate.
Oh, what animal do you think eats turtles?
Wasp.
A wasp?
Wasps
do you
are
think?
small.
Yeah, wasps are small,
Those
right?
birds.
So do you think that a small animal can eat the turtle?
No.
No, probably a larger animal, right?
Like an elephant. No, like
Like-
a horsey.
Like a horse or elephant. maybe, I don't know, but maybe this animal, maybe the turtle is hiding from this animal. What animal is this? It's a crocodile. Yeah. Goodbye, wetland.
Goodbye, wetland.
Goodbye, wetland. Look at this. Look at this
Damp.
part of the wetland.
It's
It's damp. Damp means what?
damp.
A little wet.
She has
Very
the same
good.
book.
Great. So hopefully you were able to see a little bit more about how those lessons happen in the classroom. And I love this example that we showed. There's always a lot of really great things that she was doing. And it prompted me to include some of the things to remember about when doing the Bevy lesson, is that it's to not forget that it's still a shared reading. So our lessons have target vocabulary and things, and we want the teachers to pause and focus on the vocabulary part. But you heard this teacher say how she was still asking them prompting questions. What do you think they're hiding from? What animal? So it was still very much a shared reading experience for the children. We want to make sure to not make the teachers think that they can't continue asking all of those really great comprehension questions, have a conversation about enjoying the story or what they're reading and learning about in the story, still using those illustrations to build all of that knowledge and all of their understanding. So that's another reason why some teachers prefer to break this up into maybe two sessions, because they may get halfway through the book and they've been having so many great, because she had such a sweet, very talkative class, and they all kind of wanted to jump in and talk about the different animals or the words they were hearing. And so if the teacher prefers to kind of take their time, get through half of the book, really spend some time on the comprehension piece or the shared reading part of that while they're reviewing the target vocabulary, that's wonderful. Another thing you may have noticed that she had her target words on a chart, and that would just be, again, teacher preference. I noticed that there were Valentine's Day decorations. So I was thinking, well, by February in a classroom, you may end up with some reading ready kids that are ready to kind of point out the different words that are written out in various places, and they're ready for that. So again, we definitely would not want to say, no, don't do it. Don't write it, because teachers know what their students need and what works in their class. And so, and like Carly said, my memory is not the best either. So as a teacher, I prefer to write things out, because if it's not written down somewhere, there's a good chance I'm not going to remember it. So those were some things that I wanted to make sure to include from the lesson viewing. And so the next we'll watch where this teacher then takes that activity and moves into the shared writing extension. So again, this could be this could be like a separate lesson, or depending on the time or how the teacher wants to incorporate it into the group time together. So this would come after they've read the book, they've encountered the vocabulary, and they're just going to divide a piece of chart paper into 2 columns. And with the headings, now we know on one side, and let's find out on the other side. So we'll look through, or I'm sorry, we'll watch this lesson together.
Now we're going to make a chart, okay? And I'm going to put a line in the middle of this paper, okay?
Okay, that's very blue.
That's a blue line, right?
Yeah.
And on this column, remember, say column.
Column.
Remember, a column is straight up and down, okay? So in this column, we're going to write things that we know about wetlands, okay? So it's going to say, now we know.
No.
So those are things that you learned in the story, okay?
Okay.
On this side, we're going to say, let's find out, okay?
Okay.
Let's
Find out.
find
Out.
out. Let's find out. So on this side, you're going to tell me things that you want to know that we didn't learn in the
How about love?
story, okay?
Love.
All right, you ready?
How about we learn about love?
Elizabeth. All right, are you ready? All right, tell me some things you know about wetlands.
I know about turtles in wetlands.
Turtles live in wetlands, right? So we're going to write that. Wait a minute, let me write it. Turtles
Yes, they do.
live
in the jungle.
in wetlands.
How about the giraffe?
Very good, Elizabeth.
Fish.
All right, fish.
And giraffe.
What about fish, Annabelle?
Live in the water.
Fish live in the water in where? Where do they live at?
In the wetlands.
In the wetlands. Elizabeth. Elizabeth. Thank you. Say it again, Annabelle.
In the wetlands.
Very good. Fish live in
No.
wetlands. Fish live in wetlands. All right, let's use some of our new words, okay? Can we use some of our new words and you can tell me about wetlands? Amanda. Use one of our new words. Cameron. You need someone to help you? Sure. Cameron, can you use one of our new words and tell me something about wetlands?
Dam.
Dam. What about dam?
Dam.
Wetlands are damp, right? Wetlands are shallow. So you're telling me 2 of our new words. So wetlands are damp. Everybody say damp.
Dam.
Damp means a little
Wet.
A little wet. Very good. Oh,
What
I
about
missed one.
shallow?
All right. And also, wetlands are shallow. Everybody say shallow.
Shallow.
Everybody say shallow.
Shallow.
Shallow means not deep, right?
Not very deep.
Not very deep. Very good. All right. On this column, we're going to talk about things that we want to learn about wetlands. Who can raise their hand and tell me some things you want to learn about wetlands? Elizabeth?
Fish.
What about fish?
What they eat.
Oh, you want to know what the fish in wetlands eat, okay? All right, so we're going to say, what do fish eat in wetlands, right? What is something else that you want to know about wetlands? Amanda? What else do you want to know? Birds? What about the birds? You want to know if the birds fly in the wetlands? Okay, let's see. Do birds fly in wetlands? All right. Who else? Justin? What about the turtles?
What do they eat?
What do the turtles eat? You guys are very interested about what the animals eat in the wetlands. What do turtles
Worms. Turtles eat worms.
eat?
No, they don't. No, birds eat worms.
The birds, you think the birds in wetlands eat worms?
Yeah. No, a bluebird.
A bluebird eats worms. All right, so in this column, this is what we know, right? So what we know about wetlands is that turtles live in wetlands. We know that fish live in wetlands. And we know that wetlands are damp. We also know that wetlands are shallow, right? And some of the things that we want to know about wetlands are, what do fish eat? Do birds fly in wetlands? And what do turtles eat in wetlands?
Sorry, I was going to pause it. Great. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how that that part of the Bevy lesson can be carried out. Some specifics that to include that the teacher was using. She was prompting or trying to include as much as possible in the what do we know part, to include some of the target words that they had been focusing on and spending time with as they went through the book. So trying to use those words in the sentences to kind of add those to the chart and prompting the children to actually use them in a sentence. So she was asking, when she said, let's use some of our new words, she had the little boy that remembered damp, because we've been saying damp and talking about damp as we've read this. And so she was able to say, well, what about damp? And then point out how he was actually using shallow as well. Some of their, and then they got excited when they were thinking about some of the things that they would want to find out, and ended up kind of prompting each other about who eats a worm and other things that they could go. So that could also kind of lead in the direction for the teacher if they want to incorporate some more activities there, or kind of answer these questions, provide resources and opportunities for the children in the class to find the answers to these questions that they'll have there, that they've now asked and have documented there in their classroom. Was there anything to add about that, Carly? I don't have my chat open, so let me know if there's.
No, I don't think there's comments, but I did want to share that when we designed this aspect of the activity, it was in response to our Mississippi group of teachers and coaches who really wanted a writing component brought in to the lessons. Mm-hmm. And so we added it to get the writing in, and the second column, let's find out, was added to give teachers permission to also say themselves, I don't know. So, and we've all been in the situation where the child says something and you're like, I don't know, is that right? Mm-hmm. I don't know, whatever it might be. And so being able to add, I'm not really sure about that, and writing it in your let's find out column is perfectly fine and way better than a teacher agreeing with the child about something that might not be accurate, or telling the child that they're wrong when maybe they are right, maybe whatever fact that they've learned they saw on TV or whatever. And so giving the teacher permission to add to that part of the chart, and feeling free to have that chart up in their classroom and going back to it at any point of the day, as you're going throughout the day, and a child comes up to you while we're about to go outside and gives you a fun fact or whatever, and you're like, I'm not really sure if that's right or not. Let's put that on our Let's Find Out, and we'll look it up in a book later, or, Google it after the children leave or whatever. But having that ability to do that, I think, is important for many teachers.
We did have a comment about the interactive piece of the writing extension, because this was it being more of a graphic organizer. Yes, it is a graphic organizer, and the writing extension, because this was for pre-K, this lesson was originally written and designed for pre-K students that we are not requiring to be able to grasp a pen or hold, that's the writing extension part of this is the teacher modeling that part, and they can help if their children are ready and can help with spelling, that's all where that teacher knows their children and kind of what they're capable of. So the shared writing part is the fact that they're all kind of sharing ideas, and the teacher's modeling how to organize that out. And then again, having that available for the children to come back to and read and add more ideas to later on. Great. Okay, so those are the three activities for Module 1. Now, if I can find my cursor, here we go. Now I will move into give you a little bit more information about coaching specifics for these activities, for the explicit vocabulary instruction activities. So the priorities for you as coaches when coaching for Module 1, first is that we want to help the teachers to master these key principles of the explicit vocabulary instruction lesson. So each of the goals, each of the focuses for each of these lessons, kind of the different steps that we've just been through, we want to help the teachers in any way that we can to master kind of the main targets or the main focuses for each of these lessons. The second part is we want to support the teachers' successful development of lesson plans that adhere to the key principles. So with each of these lessons, there is opportunity for teachers to take these lesson plans and work within another idea or another theme within their classroom, things that they're doing with their children. And we want to help them to feel that confidence in developing their own lesson plans, or feeling confident in taking the main goals or these key principles of these, and then taking to apply to other themes that they might be using or other targets that they want to work on with their children. We also want to support teachers' high quality implementation of the lesson plans in 1 to 2 whole group lessons each week. So we're encouraging the teachers to choose any of these 3 activities for Module 1. Remember, they're not in any particular sequence. It's teacher preference, but we would want to encourage them to do 1 or 2 of these a week. It's really gonna and just really point out how this is really going to help bring in that high quality vocabulary implementation into their classroom. We also, we want coaches to help teachers to use effective scaffolding with their individual children. And there'll be some information about certain scaffolding techniques and some of the trainings to come. And we want to give them support in how they're meeting the needs effectively for each of the individual children in their classroom. And then we want to help support teachers as they extend the implementation to 3 or 4 whole group lessons each week. So as they're having their circle time or their little group times, we want to encourage and support them as they extend that implementation. I'm sorry, I keep losing my arrow. Here we go. So a tool that you'll be using during your classroom observations is the classroom observation form. So this form, and we have one tailored for each of the modules. So the module one looks like this, and it's more in depth than the administrator checklist. We have one of those. The during classroom visit form can be used across multiple visits, across multiple observations. They, like I said, they're specific to each module, and they break down each of the key components of the different strategies or the way the lesson is structured to any of the corresponding activities. So common features between the different module or these different activities, each of the Bevy category and network, they all involve child-friendly definitions, prompting, selected target words. Sorry, I lost my screen for a second. And so each of these, they're check boxes for you, the coaches, to go through during your observation and kind of mark off some of those specific look-fors that you're seeing, but also there's spots for you to write in some of the selected target words you're seeing, types of scaffolding that you are observing. This just allows you to take a more guided approach to your observations. It's a tool that you can refer back to. You don't turn these into us, and so if you're a writer, like I jot down I try to jot down in kind of scritchy scratch writing very quickly all the different things that I'm seeing, the good things, the things I want to make sure to refer back to when I'm providing positive feedback or areas for growth, but target words that I'm hearing. So it kind of looks where you're just kind of jumping all over, where you can, oh, I heard a scaffold over here. Let me jot that down. Oh, there's another target word. So this is hopefully a very useful tool to help you to kind of remember the specific things for each of the types of lessons that you're hoping to see. The form also gives you a spot to be sure with each of the observations that you're doing to give that positive feedback. So we base this on the look-fors, like the things that are all listed up above. So any of those things that you maybe marked off and then you marked it again, maybe you saw that she prompted the children to say newly introduced target words aloud multiple times, that could be a very positive feedback. Well done prompting the children to say the target word. And then it also gives you a section to write maybe some things to work on or areas for growth. We want to be very positive and very constructive, and not too critical with these. We would leave it to maybe some of the look-fors that you didn't see, or if there was maybe a missed opportunity for scaffolding, that could just be something that it's not negative or horrible. It's just, you didn't see this, maybe next time, let's focus on that. Or maybe pointing out, this was an opportunity. This is something you can try for next time with your scaffolding to correct whatever opportunity that the coaches are seeing. So this is definitely a form that for you, the coaches, feel free to write all over it and make all your notes that you can of the things that you're seeing throughout the lesson. So, and I'll show you an example of, here we go. So this is an example of a completed during classroom visit form. So for each of these, you would just go through, sorry, I have some specifics that I want to include. So our coach went in, and for this, they were observing 2 different lessons. So maybe they were there for part of the day and came back. So they marked off what they were actually seeing and then jotted down all of the different target words, wetland, swamp, and then Felisa included the parts of speech, which some coaches can do that. So because if that's something that they want to encourage the teacher to maybe come away from all those nouns that we're so used to using and hearing and teaching. So maybe you want to jot down that I heard all of these nouns, but I did hear some verbs, I did hear some adjectives, and then could go through and mark off some of those look fors. I have a couple of arrows where I'll just kind of point out some of the important pieces for each of the different activities that we just want to bring attention to. So this was one that Carly and I have already mentioned, that one that we want to draw attention to is that we don't intend for any of the lessons to go over 15 or 20 minutes. And so that would be one that you want to make sure that you're seeing, and if not, then that could definitely be something to bring up in the areas for growth, that we don't want the teachers to feel like they have to complete the whole lesson, that it's definitely okay to, I say, read the room, and just if the kids are starting to wobble and we've kind of gone off track a little bit, especially if it's a bevy lesson and we're only a few pages in, but we've had some target word conversations, it's totally okay to say, okay, we'll come back here tomorrow, or we'll come back here later. The same with the network or the category. You've introduced the words, and maybe they're ready to be done, or they need to move on with the category lesson, and you say, okay, later on we're going to come back and play a little game. I want you to remember these categories, or we'll come back tomorrow and add more words to our network chart. And that is definitely okay. Another important, sorry, I can't see it. My pictures are in the way. Another part, so these are on the right, you see that we have more explicit look fors for tailored to each individual activity. So if you don't see a category lesson, you wouldn't even pay attention to that. So for this bevy lesson, one thing that we would want to come back to and be sure to encourage the teacher to do would to make sure that the teacher is pausing during the read aloud to discuss the target words as they are encountered in the text. That's a big part of the bevy lesson itself. So we've pre-taught those target words, and now we just want to have that shared reading experience, but also pausing to bring attention back to the target words that we just discussed. So if you were to see a category lesson, so this would be one that is an important thing to see. So prompting the students to explain why a word fits into the particular category. So that was one that we had said it might take a little finesse from the teacher to kind of keep all of these ideas contained within a certain thematic unit, but we never want to make a child feel silly or not included or that they're wrong. So if the child, and this is similar to the network lessons as well, if the child is able to explain why, it may be a very personal experience, it may be something that it might need some scaffolding or a little more explanation or a little more knowledge for the child. But if they can explain their thinking and their understanding of why a particular word fits into a category, we would want the teacher to take a second and allow them to give that. So if the child's just shouting out random words that don't necessarily sound like they do fit, we would want the teacher to prompt the students to explain why they think that word belongs. And then again, and this is the same for the anchor chart or the network lessons. So, and these, when they're all giving all of their ideas and a lot of the word web from the video, we heard a lot of the children kind of share a lot of their own personal experience words, like a swimming pool or jumping in puddles. So again, each time they share a word, we want the teacher to prompt them to explain why it comes back to that target word. Were there I see some things in the chat, so let me know if there are any questions or anything I need to pause. We're just about to go into our first breakout, but let me know if I need to clarify or answer anything.
I've been answering them as they come.
Oh, okay. That's probably what I see then. Okay. So now we're going to go into our first breakout. And this is, we'll go back to that first video we watched of Miss April doing the network lesson. And so in your breakout groups, your leader will share the video again, and we'll pause at various places so that you can discuss some of the things that you're seeing, and then kind of go through how you might fill out as a coach, how you together can talk about how you would fill out this during classroom visit form.
We're just going to watch the video, and I'm going to stop it at certain points so we can stop and have a discussion about what's going on, and kind of look over the form together. So I'm going to go ahead and play April doing our network lesson again.
About a special word called saturate. When you saturate something, that means it's really, really wet. It's filled with water. Okay, so we're going to think of other words that relate to our word saturate. Okay, can you think of any words that relate to our word saturate? Saturate, remember, is when it's filled with water and you can't put any more water into something or anything that's moist. It's completely saturated. That means nothing else will fit in it. It is really, really wet. Think about really wet.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. Going back to the classroom visit form, you can see at the top, you will fill in the teacher's name. So what teacher are you observing? What school are they at? What is the date of the visit and the time of the visit? The look fors here, we are doing a network lesson. So you would go ahead and check that box off. Select target words to explicitly teach students that are in multiple contexts and represent a variety of parts of speech. So we will be listening for that. And the selected target words for this one, you would fill in saturate, because that's her target for today. And you'll notice I stopped the video here because at the beginning of the lesson, she offered more information on the target word, right? She didn't just say this is saturate and it means to be filled with water. She kind of talked about the context, gave a more child-friendly context to aid in the children's understanding of the word saturate. We want them to make sure that they have a really good understanding of that and the word is in context at the beginning so that then later they are able to offer more words as she goes through the rest of her lesson. So that's totally acceptable to do. We encourage that, and it's a great way to children understand the target word and to ensure that they're understanding the words that we're going to relate back to it. So let's go ahead and just keep in mind, I'll scroll up a little bit in case you can't see read over some of the things that we will be looking for. And the network lesson is the very last one here under explicit vocabulary activities. So those are the kind of the look for things that we will be looking at. It's nice to see it ahead of time.
Pond. A pond. That's a good word. How does that relate to it? Why did you think of the word pond? What made you think of a pond? Is a pond wet? Has water in it? Yeah. Anybody else? A river. A river. Very good. A river is a place that is saturated with lots of water. What can we make a river? Water. How about that?
All right, I'm going to stop there again. Now there were two different interactions that we just saw. One with the first child who said the word pond, and then a second with the child who said the word river. What do you see as differences there? What were the difference? How did she interact differently with those children?
With the first one, she asked her what made her think of that word.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So during the first one, she followed up her response with why, right? She wanted her to make that connection back to the word saturate. And this allowed the child to gave her some time to explain why she chose that word. We are really open to acknowledging and including whatever the child says as a response, as long as they can back it up and give a reason why. So one example we like to use is that during one of the sessions, the space was their target word, and a little girl came up with the word dog, and we were all kind of like, well, what? Dogs are in space, but why would you say that? Why are you connecting the word dog with space? How is that related? And she said that she had just read a book where it was a dog that did go to space. So for that particular child, dog would have been a word related to it, space. And as long as they can give you a reason for that, we're good with it. Add it, and that's totally fine. So yes, she did give the child that opportunity. In the second interaction, there wasn't as much of a follow-up. She simply supplied the answer. So remember the purpose of the whole lesson is to make that connection of words. So as a coach, if I were a coach, I really would have loved to see her do that then too, give that child an opportunity to talk about why they thought river was related to the word saturate. But she supplied the answer for them. So it kind of squelched the opportunity for a discussion there. But that's just something to keep in mind. And that's something you could provide her as feedback, as improvement for next time. Maybe give the children more opportunity to speak about the relationship of the words. All right, I'm going to hit play again.
Waterfall. Very good. What's a waterfall, Ellery?
It comes down onto another waterfall that comes down to the water.
It's water that comes from way up high. This is not. It's way up high. It's falling onto the rocks. There's our waterfall. Very good. Anything else come to mind? No. A river, a pond, a waterfall. What about this?
A puddle.
It's a puddle. What's happening? Jumping. Jumping in a puddle. Do you think if you jump in a puddle that you might get wet? If you jump in it hard enough, you might even be a little saturated. So let's put jumping in a puddle. It's also connected to our target word saturate. Anything else? Anything else?
Whoops, I'm going to stop it again there. A couple things I wanted to point out here. Notice the sketches. we really like you to sketch something out, but it does not have to be this big, elaborate, perfect drawing. Just something quick and easy, like her pond is just a little river. She just uses waves. It doesn't have to be elaborate, beautiful, perfect, any of those things. Just a simple, quick drawing to help them connect to the word. And if the children do seem to be having difficulty providing examples, it's great to tell your teacher to have some in their back pocket and ready. The project does provide some examples, like you see her taking those little white squares that have the pictures on them. Those are provided by us. So the teacher could theoretically have those prepared in advance, know how they relate to the word, and kind of see how she has hers stacked up on her back table there. When there's a lull, after she gives the children think time, if they're not really ready to share or they haven't thought of anything yet, then she says, "Do you need a little help?" And she can pull out one from that she has back there. And sometimes that can kind of get the children's minds thinking, and they can start to bounce off of that word and think of some other words. So just remember, encourage your teachers to have some examples on standby, be ready to go in case her children aren't as chatty that day. Okay. Also, let's take a look at some of our things back on our observation form so we're not skipping anything. Provides a child-friendly definition for target words introduced, and provides a representation of those things in the form of a photograph, illustration, or sketch. She's doing that, so we would give her a check for that. Prompts children to say the newly introduced target words aloud. She does have them do that. The one that says allows for repeated exposure to vocabulary by incorporating target words from the lessons throughout the day. That one we would leave blank for now. We know, because we've seen this lesson, that it's only 7 minutes long and that we are only seeing this lesson. We're not seeing what else she does throughout the day. In your observations, you may stick around longer to see some other things throughout the day. So if you see that she's set up different opportunities for the children to use the word saturate or any of the target words, then you could go ahead and check that box. For today, in this lesson, we would not check that box because we don't see it. So just keep a lookout for some of the rest of those things while we're watching. And I'm going to go ahead and hit play.
Need a little help? What about this guy? I don't think he was in a puddle. Looks like he was maybe in a rainstorm. He is soaking wet. Do you know what it's called when someone is soaking wet? We can say they are drenched from head to toe. And that is also like saturated. He is drenched in water. So he has been saturated with something. He's drenched. Anything else you can think of that has to do with saturate? A duck pond. A duck pond? Yeah. Yeah, you might get tired. That's right. If you jump in a puddle long enough, it's gonna make you tired from jumping. And it made me tired when I was in the puddle. Yeah, you got tired when you were in the puddle. What is this?
Okay, I'm going to stop there again. When she talked about the event of jumping in a puddle, one student mentioned that she would be tired. That little girl said that jumping in the puddle would make her tired. So how did the teacher capitalize on that? Now, tired might not be something that we directly think of when we think of the word saturate, but how did she accept that answer from that little girl and relate it back? She connected the word to the event, right? So she went back to the event of jumping in the puddle and connected that to the word tired, and then obviously jumping in the puddle relates back to our target word saturate. So again, really affirming what the children are talking about to keep them talking and being inclusive of things. Again, as long as they can kind of relate it somehow, how it ever relates in their little heads, then we will take that as an answer.
Could you also consider that, I am reading the checklist, couldn't you also consider that different parts of speech? Because I was kind of noticing all the nouns, and then with jumping, now she's got a verb.
Yeah, now she has a verb, that's right. And so I think some of your names look familiar to me. If you were on the training yesterday, we talk a lot about that, and how it is very important to incorporate other parts of speech besides nouns. So like you said, there is a, right down here, let's see, guides creation of network ensuring various parts of speech are included. So yes, we could check off that for her because she does provide the children with at least one verb there, and we'll see what else they do in the lesson.
Washing dishes. Do you think you do? When you wash the dishes, what happens? Do you saturate the dishes in the sink with water? Put them in a bunch of soapy water, right? So that's related to our word saturate. So washing the dishes is an intent. That's something that we do to saturate the dirty dishes so we can get them clean. Let's try this. What we need. Yeah, so we have something clean to eat on. You know what this is?
A pond.
It is kind of like a pond. This habitat is called a wetland. And a wetland is an area of land that's saturated with water. It's kind of like a swamp. I think another word for wetland would probably be the swamp, because it looks kind of like the swamp that we saw in our book earlier. Okay, so
That looks like it's fine.
you think it'd be fun to be here or here? Jumping? When we do jumping in the puddle? No. What about this word? You know what this word is? This is dry. It is a cactus, and where cactuses live, it's very, very dry. So, Ellery, when something is dry, is it saturated with water?
No.
No, this is opposite of saturate, right? It is
bubbles.
What are these? No, these are rocks. Okay, so this word dry is very opposite of saturate. There's nothing wet about the desert or other dry areas. Ellery, sit up for me, please.
Okay, so one point I'd like to talk about there is that it is okay to introduce opposites. We had a couple people yesterday who had kind of a light bulb moment with that, and they said that they would have never thought to teach antonyms or words that mean the opposite when you're trying to get a child to understand the meaning of a word. But we all think in different ways, right? So maybe a child understands dry, or they're more familiar with the desert habitat. And so telling them that the complete opposite of dry or a desert is to be saturated or very wet, it could be very helpful. And it's just as important for students to learn or to be exposed to antonyms to strengthen their understanding of a word as it is to just the child-friendly definition of the word. So you really want to give opportunities and use examples and non-examples as well. So it's great that she included that in the lesson. Also, I wanted to touch on really quickly the washing dishes, because there's another verb, right? Another part of speech. So washing. So we can and make sure we check that for her as well. As an observer, I like to write all of those down. So when we check the box, guides creation of network ensuring various parts of speech are included, I would probably include washing, and I would include jumping there, just to remind myself that she did do that. So I wanted to mention that. And also, when we're looking at the network lesson, you really, again, to go back to talking about the nouns, but you also want to include all different kinds of words, as in antonyms, synonyms, make sure you have verbs, adverbs, adjectives, all of those different things. And sometimes we need a little help thinking about how we can come up with all of that stuff. So including an event is helpful, like washing the dishes or swimming somewhere where you would be saturated. So if you as the coach or the teacher are having trouble coming up with words, if you did this previously, you did your own network lesson, that could really get you thinking about some other words that you could potentially add to your lesson here to deepen their understanding of the word. All right, I'm going to let the rest of it play.
Okay, so this is opposite of this. Saturate means to be filled with water, and dry means no water at all, right? So that's the opposite. So it still makes us think of things that are opposite. Are there any other words you can think of that have to do with the word saturate?
A swimming pool.
A swimming pool. Very good. Why?
Because you want to swim.
Because you want to be saturated in water if you're in a swimming pool.
I was in a swimming pool.
Very cool. I like that. That's a really good one. That is a place we can go to get saturated.
Okay. The last point I want to talk about really quickly, two things. There was a good example of an expansion there when the child said swimming pool. The child said, you want to go swimming. And she said, you want to be saturated in the water when you're swimming. So she expanded what the child said and incorporated the use of our target word there. The other thing that she did is kind of wrap up the lesson at the end and reiterate what saturated meant once again. So in the last few minutes we have together here, I'd like to just go over the sheet. Again, we talked about the top. We would go ahead and check that we saw a network lesson. Selects the target words to teach. Yes, she obviously did that, and we could tell that that was pre-planned, right? That was not incidental. That was explicit. She knew what word she was going to teach. She knew what her target was. She knew the definition, and she knew some words. Obviously, she couldn't tell exactly what the children were going to say, but she had her sets of words there too. So we know that she planned that out, and that was explicit teaching. So the selected target word was saturate. And usually I go ahead and fill in the definition they give when I write a lot when I do observations, just because I write down what I hear a lot, so that if I go back or I miss something, for example, if I didn't catch I don't know, the prompting of children to say, but I have written it down, I know I can go back and check that box off later. So I tend to write a lot during observations, but that's just my style. I like to include what she said as a definition. So she said very wet and filled. My goodness, filled with water. She said you can't put any more water inside of it. So provides a child-friendly definition for the target words. Yes, she did. Introduced and provides a representation in the form of a photograph, object, or gesture. We said yes, that she did do that. So we'll go ahead and highlight that one. How about prompt children to say newly introduced target words? Did we see her do that? I'm sorry, Nicole, I can't hear you. You can unmute.
Sorry, I forget to click the button.
That's
sometimes.
okay. I do too.
She did sometimes.
She did sometimes. And that's something we could probably say that she could do a little bit more often back when we come down to critique her, right? So I'm going to say that prompt children more often so I don't forget. Okay. But she did do it, so we want to give her credit for that. Allows for repeated exposure to new vocabulary by incorporating target words from explicit vocabulary sessions throughout the day. That's the one that we said we're not going to check because we don't know. We don't see it, so we don't want to include it. Varies questioning between individual and student call responses. Did we see that? Mhm. We did. Conducts explicit vocabulary sessions in whole or half group sizes. So it looks like she had a smaller group there. We don't know from this particular video how many students are in her entire class, but we know that probably wasn't her entire class. So it was smaller group. Highlight that one. Implements lessons that do not exceed 15 to 20 minutes to ensure student engagement. Yes, this was about 8 minutes long. And there were some parts cut out, but for the most part. All right, so over here under explicit vocabulary activities observed, we can cross out bevy, we can cross out category because we did not observe those, but we did observe a network lesson. We already said that, yes, she did provide child-friendly definition for the word, so we would go ahead and check that one. Prompts children to explain why a word's connected to another word on the chart. Did we see that? She did it a couple times, right? And that was one thing also that we can add to her feedback, saying that she could give them more often. So I would give it to her just because we did see her do it. Could she have done it more? Yes, for sure. Whoops. Guides creation of network ensuring various parts of speech are included. Yes, we discussed that already. She did use some verbs.
Lindsay, I had a quick question about that one. Would you give her credit for the words that the kids supplied? Because the one little girl said tired, which would be an adjective, but it wasn't something she gave, but she did expand on the child contribution.
Yes, because she did add it, so I would go, that's a good question. She did add it, so I would go ahead and give her credit for that. She did talk to the child about why that it was related back to the word, and she did add it to her chart. And we really encourage them to, again, do that if the child does give something, you know, again, when you, if you were a stranger to walk in and see that, you probably wouldn't really be able to figure out for yourself why tired was related to the word. But since the child brought it up and she did talk about it and she expanded on it and she included it, then yes, I would give her credit for that. Good question though, thank you. Conclude the lesson by reviewing the network and connecting all the ideas back to the center word. I don't think we saw her do all of them. There are bits and pieces cut out of this lesson. We don't show the entire lesson. Again, if you didn't see it, you don't want to give her credit for it, but we did see her do it, do a conclusion to the lesson. She did review the main word. So we will, and in that instance, I would highlight, maybe check the box, and then I would circle this and say, well, she didn't connect all of the words back, but she did do a few and maybe list out the few that she did. But I would still give her credit for concluding the lesson and reviewing the target word. Did we see her scaffold appropriately by modeling, providing corrective feedback, and inclusion of child-friendly definitions? We did that. I think she did a really good job with that. So the types of scaffolds we heard, something like Nicole just said would be a good one to write down, that the little girl said tired and she had her connect it back. What else did we see? I'm trying to think. During pond, she also did that. Providing the sketches too is a type of scaffold, right? Providing them a picture so they just don't have to think about it. They can see a visual representation of that. What else? Did you see anything scaffold wise that stuck out to any of you?
When she was asking one of the questions in the beginning, and I can't pull it out of my head right now.
That's okay.
She asked it and the kids kind of looked at her. And so then she asked it in a different way that they might understand, and then went back to the first way.
Very good. So she kind of made that a little bit easier for them to understand. She also, when in a similar scenario, when she kind of asked them if they had any words and they didn't, then she pulled out some of the ones that she had pre-planned and did it, and that kind of helped them springboard some more, think of some more words themselves. So we did see that. So here, I just want to check our time. Okay, we have about a minute left. So we always really want to give positive feedback. So find something that the teacher did really well, whether it's providing child-friendly definitions. I would say that she did a really good job providing child-friendly definitions. She did an area for growth, like we said, would be she could prompt the children more for how their word related back. But I always try to at least give 2 positive things and 2 areas for growth. And sometimes you really have to dig to find something, but to help out with the areas of growth, you can always just go back through your form and kind of look at what didn't get checked off and use that as an area for growth. Or like that example where we only saw her do something once. Of course, we could say, you know, I noticed that you had a follow-up discussion with the word pond when it was given to you, but for the next one, you didn't give that child an opportunity to discuss the word as much or relate it back to saturate. So I'd really like to see you give the children more opportunities to speak. But overall, she did a really good job. We love April. And yeah, so then at the end, you can just kind of talk about when your next visit will be. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions about the explicit vocabulary instruction or the use of the form? We're going to do this again with another one, so you'll get to fill it out yourself next time. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go back to our big group now, and I will see you in a little bit for breakout 2.
I do have a question from one of my group members. When will they start coaching? Like, when do you expect them to start?
So if you're ready to go, as soon as your teacher attends the teacher coach training, which I feel like almost everyone has, then they can start. At the first webinar 1 of 5 for the teachers, we teach them the network lesson. And so they can spend a couple weeks getting familiar with the network lesson, trying that in their classrooms, and you can visit them, offer them feedback, and do those things until we get to the second webinar where they'll learn the bevy lessons and the category lessons. So you can start right away, or you can wait until they have all 3 of those lessons and then start. We recommend that it's 5 weeks per module. So if you were doing it exactly as we are recommending, then that would be 20 weeks. And you would want to make sure that, you know, you have that much time. Now, we are very flexible. And we know that this year especially is very unusual for everyone. And so if you can only do 4 weeks per module or 3 weeks per module, or you don't get to the last module, actually, I take that back. I'd rather you shorten each module and get to all 4 so that you try out a little bit of each one while you have us to ask questions and support you and clarify things. And then if you want to do it again next year, then you can do the full 5 to 6 weeks per module and start at the beginning of the year. And so my recommendation would be, you know, do it ideally 5 weeks per module, or do shortened modules, but do all of them so you get a taste of it, so that you're familiar with all of them.
Thank you. And we do have one question about when will they receive their materials?
So we are frantically putting these material kits together. You should see the office. And we are, you know, we're close to having several done, but we are also making sure that you have attended the first training before we send your materials out. Because there were some people in our last project that didn't attend any trainings and got the materials. And so we were a little bummed about that. So we wanted to make sure that everyone, you know, attended the first training, and we had your attendance list, and we had everyone correct, because we still have people adding and you know, backing out. And so it's a little bit in flux. And so we want to make sure that we have our finalized list before we start sending out as well.
Right. Great.
I had a question in my group that I want to direct to Carly. I hadn't had this question before and I didn't quite know how to answer it. We were talking about antonyms and how it's great to include lots of different parts of speech and including the antonym. And the one question was, would you differentiate antonym at all on your chart? Like with like everything else is in green and then that's in blue to differentiate that it's an antonym. My first response was no, because we want to make sure that the kids see that they're all connected together, but I didn't know what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, I could see it both ways. My initial thought was, sure, why not make it a different color? So yes,
we're not teaching parts of speech. We don't want to spend a lot of time on this is an antonym, this is an opposite. Opposites are, so maybe.
I mean, you could maybe do opposite. You could say that this word means the opposite of that, because most kids this age are already exposed to things like that, right? Or you could just, and this is again, you have to know the children you're working with, right? So whether you use antonym or opposite, I wouldn't introduce a new term. So if they don't know antonym or opposite, then you can just say it's not. Right. So in that video with April, she said it's not dry, and really stressing the not dry part. And I could definitely see putting it in a different color on the chart if you really want to emphasize, you know, this is, or maybe put like a faint line through it, like this is, it's not this.
Right.
But then I understand where you're coming from with making it a cohesive, you know, we're all connected kind of thing. So teacher preference probably.
Okay, yeah, I think so. That's good.
Well, now I'll move into Module 2. Just a few specifics about the Module 2. This is the explicit support for expressive language. So again, if you've attended kind of the overview, you might have well, maybe not too much on the Module 2. So this is just some information about what is contained in this module. This module focuses on, sorry, I didn't go on. So Module 2 focuses on explicit language interactions, and those interactions focus on syntax. So the conversations that the teacher is having with the students and ways that they are encouraging more sophisticated or high quality language in how the children are structuring their sentences. So the first module, we focus so much on vocabulary and building a good word base. In Module 2, the teacher is ideally, I know that in today's classrooms, center time very, very well could look very different or even non-existent on some days. So originally, our intention for Module 2 is that we move into the exchanges that the teacher is focusing on those exchanges and how the teacher can expand and kind of using during their center time to facilitate those explicit language interactions. So on the project website, this is an example on your screen right now. This is an example of one of the center cards. You and the teachers will receive, we have a set of 80 cards that are included in your kit, and they are printed out and just use that. The teacher can kind of flip through and look at some of the activities, some of the conversation starters. We have cards for the Art Center, dramatic play, blocks, and science and writing. And then with each of the center sets, there are 4 activities or language interactions for each of the language targets. So our targets that we've included with Module 2 are, we focus on prepositions, conjunctions, adverbs, and elaborated noun phrases. So each of these are explicit language targets that we're including, but they will be kind of modeled and practiced and taught in short, quick conversation exchanges between the teacher and the child. So the center cards highlight conversation starters. So we, right in the middle where you see, this is kind of an idea or a jumping off point that we've included in how the teacher can start these conversations. There's a couple, they include just a couple of conversation starters. They might join the child in a center and ask a question or comment on what the child is doing, or how the child is playing as they start the explicit language interaction. So, and just a few parts here that are included with each of the cards, I'll just point out. So with each one, we wanted to kind of make it as user-friendly as possible. So on each of the cards, we kind of have this check mark at the top where kind of tells the teacher how much prep time they might need. We tried to have a lot of the center activities be used with centers that are ongoing. So the art center, maybe there's already materials there. The block center, a very popular one that might have various materials that are there. And then we've included additional materials so that they can prepare. We have the conversation starters. We also include on the cards ideas for an upward scaffold or a downward scaffold. So for this particular card, if the teacher wanted to have conversations with their students about above, below, between, if they found that they had a student that was really grasping it very quickly, they might say, tell me something that is between these two fish on the paper. So just to kind of add a little extra challenge. And then also a downward scaffold. So if they need a little bit more attention or a little more explanation, maybe an extra model, the teacher could narrow that down. So is the button above or below his head? Or that's right, it is above his head, say above. We also on the center cards are sure to include all of the standards so that if the teacher wants to choose for a particular center, they can. If they want to focus on particular targets, they can. But also if they know that there are kind of some outstanding standards that they need to show evidence that they have touched on or included in their planning, then they can choose their center card activities based on those. And so we wanted to be sure to include those on each of the cards. In Module 2, we use this approach, the MRE approach. It's model, receptive, expressive. And I encourage coaches to, if you have teachers, especially if it feels overwhelming, and they're trying to focus on what they need to go in and say to the child or how to make sure that they're getting that back and forth conversation. Remember, go in and model it, go in and give them a chance to show that they understand what you're saying, and then give them a chance to express it using the particular language. Did we have a question, Carly?
Yes, I was just going to clarify about the cards. So you'll receive cards that are all filled out and have the information with different ideas that you can do in different centers, and they're on rings. So the block center cards are all on one ring and you can stick them at the block center. Another set of cards will be on a ring and you can put them in the art center. But then also at the end of that ring are some plain white cards that don't have anything filled in that you can fill in as the teacher or coach and use. And then our project website has the blank template as well, so you can print off more copies and write in any other ideas that you have. So you can make your own, as well as use our ideas that we provide for you. And they're all laminated and ready to go.
Great, thank you. So this, with module 2, the model receptive expressive. So this strategy or this approach, this just allows the teacher to kind of have that mindset when they go in, that when they're going to model the target word, the first thing they're going to do is go to initiate the conversation, and then they would model the target word. So the child is playing in the block center, and they could go and say, look at the block, the yellow block is above my head. Then the next piece of that, it's a really important step that we encourage teachers to not jump over, because so many times we want to jump to now you put it above your head, say above, but we want to first check their receptive understanding of that. So the teacher has modeled that. And then when they give the receptive piece, they're going to give the children a chance to kind of process, listen, and then they just show without saying anything about it. They're just going to show their understanding of the meaning. So the teacher might give the child the block and say, now I want you to put the yellow block above your head. So they're not prompting them to say anything. They're just prompting them to act that out. And then once the child is successful with that, or shows that they understand, okay, yeah, I did what you did, I put it up here where you told me to, then the teacher would move on to the expressive, which is where they'll prompt the child to then use the target word. So they might say, I'm going to place my yellow block in different places. I want you to copy me and tell me if the block is above. So then they might move over here, is it? And then wait to see when the child says it's above, the block is above your head. And that would be the expressive part of that. So with each of those center card interactions or those exchanges that we want the teachers to go in, that they all follow. This is not explicitly typed out on the center card. So this is the approach that we take when we think of how do we want to go and engage with the children already in their play. They're already there playing. We're not controlling the activity in any way. We're just joining in with them in the activities that they're already doing. And we're just having a conversation about it. And we're going to follow this approach to model, show, and give them a receptive piece, and then that expressive piece. So now we're going to watch some of these in action. So this is a module 2. I'm not sure if I shared my sound again. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to stop sharing and click that button again. Oh, I did it. There we go. So they're in the block center and talking about conjunctions.
What is Jonte using?
I'm not using those.
He's using, they're sticks, they're Lincoln Logs, okay? That's right, so we're gonna build with those. Can we use the Lincoln Logs and the Legos?
Yes.
We can do it. Can you build me something with both of those? With Legos and Lincoln Logs? Let me see if you can use 2 things. I'm gonna make a walkway.
I will make a
Can you
house.
say we're using Lincoln Logs and Legos? Can you say that? And Legos, that's right. Erin, what are you making? Let's see a city. Oh, let's make a city. But
No, let me
let's
make
only
a house.
use
I want to make
Legos.
a house.
Okay.
Do like me do,
that.
okay? Do like me do.
Good.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can use Lincoln Logs and Legos, but Erin is only going to use Legos.
I'm
Let's
using
see.
Legos.
Let's see how that works.
I'm making no, we don't need.
A town?
We
What
don't
are you
need
gonna
it.
use?
What else are we gonna need? These.
Are you gonna use Lincoln Logs or Legos?
I'm gonna get my own.
Legos? Are you only gonna use Legos? Okay, so you're not gonna use Legos and Lincoln Logs, right? That's cool. Let's see.
Then I gotta make another house for Miss Young.
You're gonna make one for Michelle? What can we do? What can we use the Legos for? So we have Lincoln Logs and Legos. How can you use that? What can we make the Legos?
I'm gonna make my own house.
Construct. Can we make a garage on the side? Let's try it. Can you do it? You want some more? You need some more Legos? Let me see what you got.
I'm making a house.
A house? Okay, so what are you using? Are you using Lincoln Logs and Legos?
I'm using that Lego log.
So just, you're only using Lincoln Logs, right?
Yeah.
But no Legos.
No.
Good. Great. Okay, so now we are going to go into our second breakout and talk a little bit more about using the center cards and having these conversations. In this breakout, with your breakout leader, you'll watch another video of some of the Module 2 activities being implemented. And we'll use this opportunity to just practice completing one of the classroom visit forms. So this, again, it's tailored to the Module 2 activity. So we'll practice in our breakouts filling these out.
I would like, ma'am, a small, a large pizza with,
Go ahead. You said large? The large one, the really big one. What else would you like?
mozzarella cheese with a green pepper and ham and pepperoni.
What kind of crust do you think you might like?
Cinnamon toast.
Cinnamon crust. Interesting. Okay.
What would you like to make? Oh, I would like to water mixed with soda.
We don't have that.
Oh, what about Sprite or something?
Excuse me, ma'am. Could I also have a drink as well?
Yeah, what?
I would just like a really tall glass of cold water.
Big pizza, cheese, pepperoni, and then some soda, and then a tall cup of coffee. Okay.
Would you like a slice?
Yeah.
All right. After you try it, I want you to tell me what you think. Describe it. Look at all that.
It's great. I like the crispy. I like the cinnamon.
Really?
And I like the ham the most. The ham is the best.
What do you like about the ham?
The ham is so good because usually ham on the bone is great. I like that too at home.
Is it tender?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love tender.
I love tender ham too.
Okay. The little girl said, we don't have that. watching these and filming them, they're hilarious because I have not a two, she's not two anymore, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old niece and nephew. And that's pretty much like every time they want to play restaurant, I tell them they're the worst restaurant ever because they never have anything in stock. So every time we play, they're like, we don't have that. I'm like, well, I don't want to eat at this restaurant. Okay, so did everyone complete their form to the best of their ability? Granted, it was a short one, like I said. I said, we already said this is elaborated noun phrases. But what were some of the target words or descriptive words that you heard being used in this particular interaction, I should say?
I used large for pizza, large pizza.
Tall and tender. Yes, tall, tender. Anyone?
Glass.
Yep, tall glass, tall. I think they said tall, cold glass of water.
Cold, yeah.
Yeah. And then with the tender, and they said like crispy green lettuce or so we got a lot of good descriptive words just in that short 2-3 minute interaction. So this was, if applicable, was there evidence of the teacher incorporating and implementing vocabulary instruction? We didn't see it, so that was looking back. So if you were in the classroom, so once again, we would want to know, is the teacher continuing on with things from module 1? So did you see a bevy lesson, a category lesson, network lesson as well? So we don't know because we only saw this short visit. So going down some more of our look fors, did any of you give the teacher credit for the first one, centers or prep with materials needed to support the use of oral language target?
Oops, the center had materials to make the pizza.
Yep.
I don't know if there were the green peppers, but I saw pepperoni.
Yeah. And with that, and obviously with the centers with dramatic play, it's always fairly easy because you can kind of use whatever is in your dramatic play area. And with the targets that we provide, if there's anything that wouldn't necessarily be in like a dramatic play center or a block center, we listed, but it's more than likely if you see them doing the interaction in that center and they're doing it quite successfully, chances are we're going to say, give them credit for the centers being prepped and ready. Did anyone give the teacher credit for focuses on the same selected oral language target over several days?
No.
Yeah, we don't know.
10 minutes.
Yep. And then same thing for the next one, since this was just a short clip, we don't know if we could give the teacher for evidence of circulating throughout centers. So that would be one thing we would want to take note of if you're in a classroom, is we want to see the teacher going from center to center, not staying in one center, engaging with just a specific student. We want to see them talking to all of the children. Did you feel that the teacher modeled correct uses of the oral language targets?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel that she did any checking for understanding? So by having them perform activities related to those oral targets. So in this one, it would just be using more receptive, so using those or describing the things in the restaurant with more descriptive words.
I don't know if it's part of the target words, but I think the teacher could elaborate when the child said, no, we don't have that. The teacher could have said, well, sometimes restaurant carries certain products like Coke or Pepsi. And so they might not be that way. It would enlarge or extend the child's understanding in running a restaurant. And there's the reason why they don't have that certain product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or ask her, just say, well, what do you have?
Yes.
What do you have for him to drink?
Yes. And even like with that, what do you have to drink? And then with this, I think with the dramatic play, it's all about, or dramatic play or the elaborated noun phrases. It's all about getting in as many descriptive words as possible. So I believe we give targets to use, but even in that instance, you could say, what other cold drinks do you have, or what other hot drinks do you have? So, and give them examples. So instead of using kind of the specific like Pepsi or Coke, that could be one way. Or do you have any, icy cold bubbly soda to drink or something like that? could be a way to infuse more language into that specific instance. Do you feel that she encouraged the students to use oral language in the conversations that they were having?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think she did.
Mhm.
I mean, she was, it was a small area that they were all in. And I think she was, at first I was kind of like, she gonna like, I wasn't sure in the beginning how her interaction was gonna go. It kind of seemed like, wasn't much gonna happen, but she
Yeah.
did,
Mhm.
let them take the lead, but she prompted on different things. So
Yes.
even like when he ordered the cinnamon, whatever you call it, breading for the pizza, she was just like, okay, that's interesting.
Yes, yes. And I love that you said that she let them take the lead, because that's basically, we're probably not going to finish this, but it's fine. But that's one of the things, like we want the children to still take the lead, and we want the teacher to be comfortable with joining play and resisting the urge to take over and make it a formal lesson. So we want them to join play and use some of the target words and kind of just like slowly incorporate them and make it seem like we're having a conversation. They're just asking a few questions while joining play. So I like the fact that you mentioned that she just let them be, and she just joined in.
She was fortunate she had a little boy who knew everything he wanted on his pizza.
Exactly.
Like, what 4-year-old wants green peppers?
Exactly.
I was like, okay.
Yeah, no, most of the 4-year-olds I know, I'm like, cheese, please. I'll just have cheese.
Right. Plain cheese or maybe pepperoni, but that's it.
Any other follow-ups here before we finish with the module 2 section? Anything our groups noticed or questions?
I have a question from a coach.
Okay.
Hold on. I just forgot what I was going to say. Never mind. I have it written right here. The copies of the forms, do they keep those like during the classroom visit forms, or do they need to submit those to us? How does
No, they
work?
don't.
Okay. Okay. So they just
No,
keep
those-
those for the record. Okay.
Yes, yes. And those are, I would say coaches will, when we have our coach support webinars, we all kind of come together, and that is a chance where you come back to meet with us. And we would love for you to bring that with you so that you can share specific things of what you're seeing in the classrooms. But yes, you don't turn any of that into us. So feel free to write all over it, share it with your teacher, talk with it about them, and then be sure to mark any questions or great observations or ideas to share back with our team at the coach support webinars.
So the teacher did model by saying she wanted a tall, cold glass of water. Those are the describing words, tall and cold. That's the elaborated noun phrase, tall, cold, glass, right? So that was her chance to model. And then she told the child that's what she wanted. So if the child brings her back a glass of water, then she understands. And then the part where the child walked over to the chef and said, hey, she wants a tall, cold glass of water, was the child expressively doing it, saying it. So okay, that makes sense. I thought we were looking for the words delicious, tasty, tender, delightful, and spicy. So no. No. Those are just examples. Was that on the center card?
Yeah.
Is that where you're seeing that? Yeah, those are just examples. So you'll see on the center cards that we give you, particularly with the elaborated noun phrases, they're going to be a little bit different, right? So we give you a couple ideas, but let's say we give you garnet and gold, since we're up here in Tallahassee. We give you garnet and gold as you're describing colors for the center activity, and you go into the center and the children are playing with blue cars and purple cars. Well, then you can't use those describing words, right? It wouldn't make sense. And so you adapt to whatever it is that the children are doing and whatever makes the most sense.
I really appreciate it, because it's really important, because we were in my group too, we were looking at we came up with all of those. The little boy had so many great describing words, and he knew what kind of pizza he wanted. And so it's really important to point out that that was her explicit piece of that she was taking. So she was encouraging all of them to use this really great, elaborate describing language. But that was where she kind of honed in to what her target was and how she was making sure that she did that explicit piece. So I think that answers all of our questions. If there are not any more, Carly, I'll hand it over to you.
So now we talked about module 1 and module 2. Maybe you've attended the teacher coach training where you got module 1, a little bit of that. And now we're going to talk about how do we coach teachers to do module 1 and 2 well, right? So our disclosure statement. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to use the chat box. I'm going to use the chat box a couple times today as we spend the rest of our afternoon together. Or I guess it's still morning. But before we begin discussing coaching specifics, I want you to take some time to think about word choice, because we're teaching vocabulary and there are a million words. And so how do we pick the words that we're going to teach? So learning how to select words is usually a common question that comes up, like, how do I narrow it down from all of the possibilities? So we're going to discuss word selection later in our training, but first I want us to start brainstorming some words that align with one of our themes, oceans. So our 3 themes that we provide for you are oceans, wetlands, and desert. And all of our books and all of our activities surround one of those themes. So let's focus in on ocean. We've got a little picture here to kind of get your mind going. And in the chat box, I want you to type a few words that come to mind when you think of ocean. And I also want you to jot them down, because we will be referring to these words later in the training in our last breakout. So write them down and type some in the chat box. Some words that come to mind if you were teaching the ocean theme in your classroom, what words would you teach? So I've got coral, fish, water, colorful, salty, woo, lurk, alive, living. Oh my goodness, y'all are going so fast. Salt, blue, dolphins, coral reef, sharks, marine, aquatic, shimmering, marine, shells, dolphins, waves. Woo. Enormous, stripes, dotted. Look at y'all, you already got the hang of the don't just pick nouns. Jellyfish, drowning, current, beautiful, floor, salty, expansive. Oh, that's a good one. Floating, bright, underwater, flowing, coasting. These are all great words, lots of verbs, lots of describing words, turbulent, eating. The other thing that I like to note, and I'm not really supposed to say anything right here, but you know, once you start teaching the verbs, you are going to naturally teach some nouns in there as you're describing it, right? Because if the dolphin is leaping out of the water and you're teaching leaping, you're also going to get dolphin in there as you're describing what leaping is, right? And so it's not like we're telling you don't teach nouns, but you're going to end up teaching the nouns anyway as you address the more complicated verbs and describing words. So those are all fantastic. Make a side note, hang on to those so that we can circle back to those later. Okay, so how do we support teachers? Implementing these language and vocabulary strategies may be difficult for some teachers. Some teachers are naturally chatty and some teachers aren't. And so it is
It's a personality thing sometimes. It can also be a behavior management thing. If a classroom is really chaotic, it's unlikely that the teacher can engage in high quality language instruction. Some teachers need to talk more and see themselves as a conversational partner and not a referee. Some teachers just need to be more intentional in their use of the novel language and sentence structures. And by intentional, I'm talking about, spending several weeks addressing prepositions like above and below, as opposed to jumping around and, oh, I'm going to do above and below today. And the next time I talk to them, I'll use some conjunctions, but making it much more intentional in what you're going to focus on and how you're going to expose the children to those language targets. All teachers are different and all teachers need different levels of support. We talk about differentiating instruction to children. We also want to differentiate instruction to teachers and support them in the ways that they need. So, child engagement. It's really important that children stay engaged during the lesson. We really want them to learn the language and vocabulary that the teacher is teaching. We also want them to have multiple opportunities to talk and share their ideas and use the vocabulary being taught. There really should never be long stretches where the children are just listening, right? Just passively listening. The children should be engaged in answering questions or having discussions, these back and forth dialogues with the teacher or with each other. So remember that the best way for the teacher to get and keep the children's attention is to make sure that they have the child's attention before they begin whatever it is that they might be doing, a lesson or an activity. And then the pace is super important. Keeping the pace of the lesson moving steadily also helps keep their attention. And, if the children are not engaged, if it's taking too long to do the lesson, you're going to lose them. When a teacher really requires active participation, she may ask the children to respond, but then repeat the question individually for any children that didn't answer. It may also be that the teacher asks questions that require the children to move, like in our category lesson where, maybe they're going to say the animals that fly versus the animals that crawl. And so they're doing something which helps create some more engagement. And then not calling on children in a predictable pattern, really just hopping around so no one knows when it's going to be their turn to do something. But really, we encourage teachers to read the room. And this is really simply knowing when there may need to be a wrap up in the lesson so that the children can have a break or move on. If you have been doing a lesson for 5 minutes and they're already antsy and crawling around, then maybe it's time to stop and come back later. If the lesson goes on for 15 to 20 minutes and they're really engaged and they're talking and they're participating, then go with it, stay with it. There again, I can't imagine them holding focus for much longer than 20 minutes, but if they're engaged and they're loving it, keep doing it. And so, no, we don't really set a specified time on these lessons because we really want to encourage teachers to read the room and then take a break if they need to and come back if necessary. You can always come back later in the day. You can come back, the next day or later in the week. So there's lots of options. We don't ever want teachers to feel like they have to trudge through something in order to get it finished. Now, in a well-organized classroom, children gain support through the resources around them. So the goal is to make it more inclusive to the varying needs and abilities of the children. So these are all ways that a teacher can make her classroom more inclusive of all the children's needs. You want a clearly defined classroom layout that allows the children to feel confident in their classroom. You want them to have a stable and consistent schedule and expectations so that the children feel confident and successful. They feel like they can do what they're supposed to do in the classroom. So really encouraging teachers to help themselves by making rules and schedules and organizing their classroom. We also really like visual supports like labels, picture labels, word walls, charts, like our network chart. We really encourage teachers to put that up in the room and leave it there. Maybe you have a writing center, you can put it in the writing center. And if you have sketches and words, you can imagine the children trying to copy your words, or you know, maybe they're adding other things to the network while they're in the center. So lots of opportunities to make it, again, a living document. But if you have these visual supports, then the children are going to learn that they can look around the room for visual reminders and help, even if the teacher is not available to assist them. Now, we're going to talk about some common coaching challenges. We have been doing this same exact project in Mississippi for the past 3 years, and we have seen a lot of things come up that are challenges for teachers that we would like to share with you, so that if your teachers have these same challenges, you know how to help them right from the get-go. And so we're calling them Common Coaching Challenges, or CCC. Okay, so the first one is common coaching concern number 1, which is pacing. And it says, Miss Martin is eager to implement Bevy, that's the book one, with her students. She has spent all week planning and selecting words to teach. During her pre-teach, Miss Martin is eager to get through the 10 words selected for pre-teach and soon begins the shared reading. During the second encounter of the third target word, her students start complaining. One student is laying down, another student keeps interrupting and asking when will they finish. Others are quickly zoning out and losing interest. Looking at the clock, Miss Martin realizes she's been conducting the lesson for 30 minutes. She's nowhere near being finished, but she decides to push through. So, how do we coach Miss Martin? What I would like for you to do is, in the chat box, give me some ideas on things that we can do to help this teacher who is doing a 30-minute Bevy lesson. Too long, too many words. Shorten, yes. Shorten your list of words and shorten the amount of time your lesson is taking. Go back to our goal. What is the point of the lesson? I love that. Yes, constantly asking. And I love to ask teachers prompting questions, right? Chunking the lesson, yes, absolutely. I really love with Bevy to do the pre-teach one day, especially if you have a long book or a lot of words. Do the pre-teach one day, do part of the reading one day, do the second part another day, do the writing another day. So you could spend all week theoretically doing one Bevy book. Read the student behaviors, notice that they're not engaged, and read the room and stop, right? Focus on less time. Encourage her to use a timer so she can stop and evaluate the student engagement. Yep, use a timer. Is definitely a powerful one, because sometimes teachers just lose track of time. And so those are all really good ideas. Also, letting the teacher know that just because you came to see a Bevy lesson doesn't mean you have to see an entire Bevy lesson. Sometimes I think teachers feel like when a coach is there, they need to put on the full show. So allowing the teacher to know, you know, that she can still, just as she normally would, stop and pick up later if necessary. All good ideas. Good job.
Okay, so pacing is the issue here, right? And it's important for all the lessons. We want to move through the lesson at an appropriate speed, not too fast, not too slow. And again, 15 to 20 minutes is the max, but you might need to shorten your lesson depending on the age of the children you teach, their attention span, if they're special needs students, if they're English language learners. So we really just want all teachers to read the room and adjust their lesson length accordingly. Keeping in mind that the lessons can be broken up across multiple days, just like you all said. Okay, common coaching concern number 2. Ms. Lewis, and this is commonly seen in the category lesson. Mr. Lewis has recently started implementation of the category lesson. He noticed that he has a difficult time keeping the lesson on track as he's constantly stopping to deal with behavior issues. During your observation, you notice that during the What's Your Sign game, the students are up, wandering around the class, and will routinely leave the whole group session to play with toys or read books or visit the centers. The classroom rules are posted but never discussed during the lesson. Mr. Lewis spends the majority of the lesson trying to herd the students back to the carpet. He eventually gives up and finishes the lesson with the few students remaining on the carpet. So here again, type into the chat how we could help Mr. Lewis. And this is the category lesson, so it often involves the children standing up and making gestures and doing things, which can get them excited and a little bit antsy and takes a little bit more structure to keep them reined in. We have needs classroom management training, absolutely. Rituals and routines not in place. He has the rules posted, but maybe he's not reviewing the rules before the lesson, just like Christina mentioned. Yeah, he might need an incentive while he helps them build the habit of staying seated. Tell him to review the classroom expectations before he starts the lesson, teaching the kids how to interact, helping him create expectations for the activity. We've had coaches and teachers both say that it would be a great idea to model before we start the activity. This is how you're going to act, and this is what it's going to look like when you do these things, and kind of act it out and allow them to see the expectations as well. So acting out the expectations can also be helpful. All good ideas. Great. So behavior management, no matter how much we stress it, always still seems to be an issue for some teachers. So one of the best things a teacher can do is plan ahead and be consistent. They should be prepared with all their materials so that the kids aren't waiting. The teacher should be consistent with their expectation, praise, and consequences. And really, I always like for the children to be able to earn back whatever it is that they've lost to improve their behavior. If you take away playground time right there at the beginning of the lesson because they weren't doing whatever, and you don't give them the chance to, if you do this, you will earn your playground time back, then why are they going to act properly from that point forward? And so always making sure that we give children the opportunity to improve their behavior is also important. Choices should be given instead of threats. So do you want to sit in the yellow chair or the blue chair? Is a much nicer way for everyone than to say, sit down and be quiet. And so really establishing expectations, we're going to listen carefully, we're going to follow directions, we're going to take turns, and establishing those from the beginning is very important. Okay, common coaching concern number 3 is differentiating instruction. And these are often seen in the center card activities because this is where differentiating instruction is so important, because like I had mentioned earlier, Maureen may need me to model and then me to do the receptive part several times before I'm even ready to try to get her to say the language target. Whereas Emily is a really savvy language user, and I can jump right into the expressive portion with her. So I naturally am differentiating instruction in Module 2 with the center card activities. So listen to this scenario. You're in a classroom doing an observation for Miss Wilson during center time. During her interaction, she noticed she seems to only interact with students that have mastered the language targets. And any follow-up questions she asks are softball questions or too easy. Each interaction turns into a mini lesson with very little opportunity for students to practice the target. So she's talking, but the children aren't getting to talk a whole lot. After speaking with Miss Wilson, you've discovered that she just finds it difficult to implement the lessons with students that have a difficult time responding, since thinking on her feet just isn't her forte. So how could we help Miss Wilson with differentiating instruction? And you can type your ideas into the chat box again. A scope and sequence or checklist. Yes, I love that. And we actually do provide that when we get to Module 2. We'll show you what a little bit of our checklist or record keeping looks like that you can use or you don't have to. Pre-write questions. I love that idea. Great. Teach her to scaffold, showing her how to plan ahead for different needs and how, you know, a scenario might look with a child that has weaker language skills. Sample prompts. I love, love, love that. Model for her support providing wait time for children to respond. A timer for student action or talk time. When she turns on the timer, she cannot speak during that time. I love that. I love that. Encouraging her to model the language she is looking for, creating a type of sentence frame before asking the student her question. So my favorite flavor of ice cream is strawberry. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream? I like that. Yes, because then if the child says chocolate, you can even prompt for, depending on their ability, you might prompt them to say, you know, my favorite flavor is chocolate. To see if you can get it into a phrase or a sentence. Or even, depending on the ability of the children, just having them say chocolate ice cream might be a big success, or chocolate for that matter. Okay. And then, you know, one of our scaffolds that we will eventually go over at one of our other trainings is forced choice. And so in this example, if you have a child with really weak language skills or an English language learner, knocking it down even further and saying, is your favorite flavor chocolate or strawberry? And giving them the two words, and they might even, you know, point or whatever. And if they, you know, maybe you have a picture, or if you're actually having ice cream. And so they might point, and then you can say, this is chocolate, say chocolate. And they might not, but giving them the opportunity is always a good idea. So differentiating instruction, if you really remember the MRE, but also give yourself permission to come into the MRE at any point. So a child may not need you to model for them. They might need to jump right to receptive or even expressive. And so giving yourself the freedom to jump in where it is most appropriate for the children. Okay. Maintaining focus. So here we have a bevy lesson. He's pre-planned, chosen words. He does a thorough job introducing the words, providing child-friendly definitions. After he introduces and defines them, he reads the entire book without any discussion or emphasis of the words. Then he concludes by stating they will reread the book tomorrow.
So how can we help this teacher who did the first part of the lesson correctly, but then didn't quite have the follow through that we need? Sticky notes. I am a big fan of sticky notes. Yes, I stick them in any video you see of me on the website. I've got sticky notes all over my book. Absolutely. Have them put sticky notes on the pages as reminders to stop. Yes, I think that that is a fantastic strategy. Okay, moving on. So the focus of Bevy is to incorporate explicit vocabulary with a large group during shared reading. Pre-teaching the target words are only one step. It's important to remember that they need to complete all the steps. So if they don't feel like they have enough time to do that in one session, they can break it up over days, but making sure that they return to that and doing the shared reading component where they pause. The network lesson could also have this problem. And remember, we're trying to form the connections between the words. So it's important to encourage your teachers to discuss all the connections between all the words that the students and teachers generate. So quantity is not as good as quality. We want the explanation, not a whole page full of words where we didn't have any good discussions. So just honing in on the main point or goal of the lesson. Common coaching concern number 5 is that the network lesson is too difficult. We had so many teachers tell us this. This lesson is way too hard for little children. And so they say it's too difficult. The words selected for each lesson just aren't appropriate for the age group. That's where differentiating instruction might come in. They're not confident in their drawing skills. They feel as if the children won't be engaged. You've modeled the lesson. They've watched the sample lessons, yet you just can't convince them to try it. So how can we help this teacher who just does not even want to try the network lesson because it is way too hard? Pre-print the picture cards for them, so take away some of the planning component. Do the lesson with the kids, model it for them. And I have gone into multiple preschools and done this lesson with multiple different groups of children and have found that the children really love it. So if you can just convince the teachers to try, I think that the kids' engagement will be a great buy-in. Make a focused list of vocabulary, practice with the teacher, which is a recent idea that I've heard from several of you, is where the coach and the teacher just have a mock session together. I love that. Have other teachers who love it talk to them, right? The teachers need to understand vocabulary is not developmental as long as the students already have words in their vocabulary to define new words. Yes. Absolutely. And so maybe they watch our saturate video and they're like, oh, saturate's too hard. Okay, we'll pick a different center word, right? Have more picture cues to support the students. Excellent. Great. Okay, so teachers can create and implement their own lessons with their own center words. They can select words that they feel are developmentally appropriate, and making sure that they're not trying to teach decoding by reading words through the lesson, because that will take the lesson into a whole new tangent. And then, of course, the drawings, reiterating that they can just be sketches. Okay, here we've got the concern of book selection. So he wants to select books for Bevy. He doesn't want to use expository books. How many of you have seen teachers who are scared of expository books? We have found that quite a bit, and that's one of the reasons why many of the books we provide for you are expository books, because we really want teachers to see how engaging they can be and how children will eat them up, right? So we really spent some time looking for the best expository books that we could find and share those with you. But this particular teacher is scared of them. So how can we sell teachers on expository books? Okay, Jill says select pages that they are most comfortable with, right? You don't even have to read the whole entire book. Let's focus on just these couple pages. I love that idea. Okay, is this a content issue? Does the teacher just feel that they don't know enough about this particular topic? Because then if that's the case, maybe they pick a topic that they feel more comfortable with, that they know more about, which would also be find a good author and illustrator to choose from to make them more comfortable. Pair narrative and expository, and we did that a lot too in our book selection. We have the Snail and the Whale narrative book for ocean, and then we have books like Water Habitats. Or about Habitats Ocean, explore the reason for the resistance, just talk it out. So all of those are good ideas. This group is my favorite yet. Don't tell anyone else though. Make them theme related. That always helps tie everything in together and help everyone feel more familiar about the topic, and making sure that the words are represented in the book multiple times. Word selection. Again, this is when we're feeling really overwhelmed. We don't know where to start. What words do we teach? Content, knowledge, and implementation are strengths, but you notice the target words she chooses to teach are all over the place. There's little variation to word type, as most of her target words are nouns. Additionally, some of the words that she has chosen do provide a challenge to the students, but are extremely content specific. She insisted that chlorophyll was an essential word that her students learned during her unit on plants. So how do we help Miss O'Brien with word selection? Teach her how to select words for young students. The difference between tier 3 and tier 2 words. Mindsets and beliefs, tier 2 information. I love that. Choose words children will use in their world. Model how we would think through choosing words. Oh, that's a really good one, Amanda. Really, think out loud, right? Okay, if I'm teaching plants, I'm going to choose sunshine and whatever. Prepping words, model for her, ask her about extensions. How is she using words outside of this lesson? All good ideas. Yes, absolutely. And we have this little table here to kind of guide you. And you could certainly, share this slide with your teacher if this was an issue for her. But we have these 5 areas to consider when choosing which words to teach. The unit of study should center around a particular theme, which allows the children to develop that depth of knowledge, right, in a particular content area. Then, of course, you want to always think about parts of speech and making sure you have a variety. Key knowledge concepts support the children's understanding of important content area knowledge, like the importance of the wetlands. So key concepts are the ideas and understandings that we as educators hope that the children are going to take with them and remember long after they have left our classroom, right? So a key concept about wetlands is that they provide a habitat to many plants and animals while helping the environment. Then you have more fun specific content knowledge, like there's 565 different types of birds that live in the wetlands. That's not so much something that I need for them to remember 5 years down the road. But I do want them to remember the part about the wetlands providing a habitat to many plants and animals while helping the environment. So being thoughtful about what key knowledge concepts do you really want them to remember? Creating connections between words and across content areas helps the children remember words and apply knowledge in their world.
teaching within the themes helps create these natural connections among words, and across themes, you can imagine having multiple networks and they're all kind of connected to one another. And then the last one is really the multiple contexts. So connecting between those content areas. Okay, so we have a little bit here about word selection. What are the things we can see and touch related to this topic? Different questions that you can ask yourself or your teacher as she's coming up with words. If she's like, I can't think of any verbs that have anything to do with this, then you can ask her these questions to prompt her to think about words that she can use. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our last breakout session, and we're going to spend just a few minutes looking at a big list of words and deciding which of those words are the best words to teach, and then coming up with a way to define those words for the children. And while we're in our breakout group doing that, we will also spend a few minutes completing our stakeholder feedback survey. And then we'll come back just to go over next steps and wrap up answering any questions that you have. So we will go to breakout number 3 now.
So did any of you all, I mean, we can add to this list. So this is just a list that we have of random words that we could use in terms of help them solidify and understand oceans, if we use that as a theme. Did any of you all have any words that you came up with that we can add or that you want to add to this list? Yes, no?
I added boat because I think kids know a boat goes on the water, or kids, it's kind of easy to demonstrate, or, you know, you could even get a container of water in your classroom and show them a boat goes on that and kind of explain a little bit about the ocean. It's, you know, full of water.
Yeah, so yeah, let's add boat on here. Anything else?
I mean, I added in again, fish.
Fish, yeah, I know. Anything that you've
just
added.
Things that I feel like are more common to kids to explain to them about the ocean, and depends on how elaborate you want to go and, you know, what's in the ocean.
And we have reef and coral from Rosalinda. So
I added a school.
To talk about like school of fish, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So since we are, let's work with these. So out of all of the words that we have here, I'll go through and I mean, let's talk about them. Are there, besides the ones that you all added, I'll go ahead and highlight these green. Are there any ones that stick out to you that you think you would incorporate? Some that you think would not be a good word? Like, we'll talk it through. What do you think you would want to include and why?
I see a lot of words that I would take out.
Let's talk about
I was in like fourth or fifth grade.
What would you take out?
I would take out gloomy, crustacean,
yeah. I'm gonna
probably treacherous.
Foggy.
I'm gonna highlight some of those foggy.
I would probably take out tsunami. That's, you know,
that is very content specific. That one, like, you would not use that.
Well, I'm not sure I want to teach them about a tsunami because it's kind of a scary thing unless I'm talking about, you know, how we have tornado drills now here in our schools, and we never used to have those. Maybe one day we'll have a tsunami drill. Climb up to the highest point.
What else?
I said the crustacean. And I don't know what. Treacherous is a pretty scary word to me. I don't know.
No, this is good. Like, yeah, let's talk about it. I would make a case for including gloomy and foggy, and I'll tell you why. In one of our lessons, we have actually included gloomy, and we have selected it as a target word that we've taught children, and it's in it's not in module 1 or module 2, but it's in dialogic reading because we thought it would fit better for a DR lesson. We have taught gloomy. Gloomy is a word that we have taught the children, and they picked up gloomy. It's a describing word. And also I think keeping in mind, we want to challenge them with some of our word selections, but also keeping in mind, like we talked about earlier, what your children already know and kind of what they're capable of. So what is the level that your children are already at? Gloomy, and that's the thing with our word selection, we don't want to make sure that we're teaching words that they already know, or that we would assume, like boat and fish. Like we know that children for the most part probably already know what a boat and a fish are. So we would probably want to challenge them. So maybe in school would be one to teach, because you can talk about school of fish. So that would be something to kind of build on within an ocean theme. I would teach gloomy. I would select dive, because that's something you could do in the ocean or in the water. The fish and the mammals, and you have orca and whales, they're diving. So you could talk about how animals would dive. So with that in mind, like I would just keep that in mind and challenge teachers, even when you're thinking about word selection. And also just parts of speech. So even the words that we selected, or that you guys had came up with, so school, boat, fish, reef, coral, those are all nouns. So what would be some adjectives or some other parts of speech that you think you would want to include, so that we kind of get away from focusing on just all nouns?
Felisa.
Yes.
Isn't a crustacean is in the part of the category of like shellfish? Crustacean.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to remove crustacean when you're talking about ocean crustacean?
Yeah, no, this is
land or can be in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. So do you think is the issue with crustacean would, because Darcy, do you say that you wanted to remove crustacean, or was it you, Melissa?
Yeah, I just thought it was for beginning out for me, for teaching the ocean in one of the beginning lessons, I wouldn't add a lot of those big words yet until I did more of an overview of the ocean, and then, figured out where their level was. Again, I teach pre-K special needs. My kids have, I'm not in a Head Start class. A Head Start class, you're going to have a whole different view of what you're going to teach.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I
mean, I have kids that don't repeat a word, don't say a word. I have echolalia in here. I mean, I've got a lot of things that you don't have in a typical class. So I really have to modify. And that might be a word I would use with a child that maybe was higher on, their vocabulary and that kind of thing. But I would not start out with that. I would start out with very, and lots of pictures.
Yes. I love that
you can, if you want to do the crustacean, you want to show them seashells or show them pictures, and, I just don't want too many words to confuse them. That's my thing.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think,
expand.
Sorry. That you mentioned a good point. Like I said, you know your level of your children, and like you said, you're working with pre-K, you're working with special needs. So for your children, it would be beneficial to start with more simple, basic words. So things like boat, school, fish, things like you can, like you said, easily provide visual representations for, to come in, and these kind of introductory basic words would be a great place to start with ocean words. So I think that's the other thing to kind of keep in mind, is that all of our lessons, we have different levels of adaptability, so you can start with some basic words. If your children maybe need a little challenge, you can add more advanced words. Or if you really think, you want to teach crustacean, but maybe you'll start with shellfish, or maybe you start with crab, and then you work your way up to giving the label of a crustacean. So there are so many different ways to go about thinking of word selection and good words that you could use, and also just words that would be beneficial for the children. So, but yeah, I think if the words that we've highlighted green, I think salty would be a good word, because we talk about the ocean as we need to know that it's salty, it's made with salty water. But if you were talking about other habitats, you can see how that could talk about where else would you find salty water. So we talked about how wetlands or sometimes some rivers may have salty water. So that would be, I think I would vote for salty as a word to teach. What do you guys think? What do you all think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I might even expand that and get like, water that's plain water and put some salt in the water and have, once we're out of this whole COVID thing, have them, taste it and see which one. Oh, look, that tastes different. That's like salty water.
Yeah. So have
some. I'm in Key West. I could just go to the ocean.
You can just go to the ocean, grab a
right. I'm right here.
Yeah, but yeah, have them experience what is the difference between salty water and fresh water. Like
I would probably add in seaweed now that I'm thinking about it, because seaweed is something that you see the minute you walk to one of our beaches, and it smells just lovely.
And it does smell lovely. I grew up in Melbourne Beach, so I am very aware of the lovely smell of seaweed. Melissa, is there anything that you think you would want to add, or things that you think would be beneficial to keep, or what?
Yeah, I was thinking I probably would add deep and shallow. Just to talk about, they might swim or go in the shallow water, and what would you find in the shallow water? And then in the deep water, there's a whole new, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, and I think and even from deep, like going back, I think that is a way that you could, if you wanted to, you could get in to dive, because you can talk about how you're diving in deep. And even shallow, you could talk about
tide pool.
Yep, that's exactly what I was talking. Yeah, tide pool. So there are so many different ways to kind of go about this, but I love what Carly said, of thinking about what's our goal, like what you want them to learn or walk away from this lesson, knowing what are the overarching or most important parts about the ocean. So I definitely think like deep and shallow, talking about reefs, coral reefs. I think obviously talking about salty, that it is salty, and that there are I have waves on here twice, but talk about what a wave is. But yeah, I love that. So why don't we, turquoise, yes, so getting some color words in their descriptive words. I like that. So why don't we pick two of our favorites that we would want to go ahead and describe, and while we are doing that, I'm also going to send you all a link to actually I'll do that in a little bit, but I'm going to be sending you a link to our stakeholder feedback survey. But what two words would we want to go ahead and define?
I would say salty.
Salty, okay, we'll go with salty. And what else?
Wet, or waves, I don't know.
Why don't we do salty and waves? Why don't we do that? So we'll do salty and waves. And I want to share, have any of you attended our teacher and coach training, or is this the first training for all of you?
First one for me.
First one, okay. What about you, Melissa?
Sorry, I was muted. I did the teacher training yesterday.
Okay, you did the teacher training yesterday. And Rosalinda, is this your first training, or did you do the teacher training as well?
Oh, I'm sorry, Felicia.
I did the Saturday training.
You did the Saturday training. Okay, all right.
I thought you said coach training. I did the teacher training yesterday.
Okay, all right, perfect. So you ladies already know about the Collins Dictionary and the kids.wordsmith.com. So you've already seen that, and you already know our plan that we go through in terms of doing the target words. So how would you describe, or how would you define salty? What would be your child-friendly definition for salty?
Tastes like water.
Water that has salt in it.
Tastes like water, and
not
like
good to drink.
Yeah, water.
Water that has salt in it. And what did it say? Something about water that you don't want to drink? Did someone say that?
Not like drinking.
Not good to. Yeah, not good to drink.
Yes.
Not for drinking.
Water that has salt in it and is not for drinking. Yes. And then we said waves. Waves is our other word. How would we define waves?
Motion.
Let's see what our dictionaries say.
Kids.wordsmith.
American waves, English waves. Oh, a moving ridge or swell on the surface of a body of water. That's
So
gonna
maybe be like when the water rises in waves.
Okay, so
when the water goes up and down, maybe.
When the water goes up and down, or maybe
when the water in the ocean goes up and down.
Yeah,
but you could
okay.
demonstrate that in like a container in your room.
When
and
the
make
water
waves.
rolls up.
When the water, what did you say? When the water
rolls up,
rolls
I think
up.
Rolls.
Yes, rolls up and down in the ocean.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that. And that's what I was just thinking, that would be something for both of these words. Like you said, that would be a great time to bring in some sort of like visual or a tactile demonstration. So the salty water, having them taste fresh water and salt water, and then using like you said, like a tub to show water sloshing and pointing out the waves.
That could be something that you mentioned, that you probably, when they probably all at this age take baths, hopefully,
Yes,
to get all
like
the
you
dirt out of their
probably made-
fingernails.
Mhm.
They probably have waves, like when you're taking a bath, you make waves in your bathtub. When you move around, the water moves.
Yes, I love that. Yes, all are great.
So our next steps, we have more trainings coming up. So right now you're at the coach only training 1. So there's 2 coach only trainings. There's one where we talk about module 1 and 2, which you're doing right now. And then there's one where we talk about module 3 and 4, which will come in March. Excuse me. Then in between there, we have the coach teacher trainings. And in January, we do the overview and network training. And that's part of module 1 and an overview of the project. We have one of those dates left, and it's part 2. So normally the trainings are always 4 hours, but because substitutes are an issue for many places right now, we have tried to be as accommodating and creative as possible with scheduling. And so we created a part 1 and a part 2 training where we do 2 hours and then we do 2 more hours on another day. And that's the training that we have left. So we're just finishing up the training that we started yesterday, next Wednesday. Then we have the rest of module 1 where we talk about bevy and category lesson and review network lesson. And that'll come at the beginning of February. And then module 2 will be at the end of February. And that's where we do the center card training. You'll see the link at the bottom of this slide. Sorry, just realized that I didn't switch that. You'll see the green link at the bottom of this page that allows you to go and register for the dates of the trainings that you want. If you've already done that, ignore this. But if you have not selected your training dates, or if your teachers have not selected their training dates, they need to follow this link. And if we could get someone to copy and paste that into the chat box, that could be helpful. We're really asking for every individual to register themselves. So teachers must register too. This way we know how many participants will be attending each training. And we could also imagine a case where the teacher and the coach can't attend the same date. And so we would need for you to register on your own in that case anyway. Okay, and we will share a new link in February for the March dates and the April training dates. Now, we also have dates for coaching support webinars, and these are the dates listed so far. So module 1 will be in February, module 2 will be in March. They're only 1 hour long. All of our times are Eastern Standard Time. And these dates, you don't have to register for the training. The link will be shared, and then you can go in at that designated time and participate in the meeting. It's meant to be more of an open forum or discussion as opposed to a training like today, where you can ask questions or say, you know, my teacher was doing this, how can I help her? And you can attend all 3 of those if you like. So we really encourage you to attend those. We've gotten so many good ideas from these, and they're really a great resource. So please attend those. And then our project website. Here's our project website. We have a password for the teachers, and then we have a password for the coaches. And the coach password, we ask that you don't share with the teachers, because we're trying to give you an edge up on them and give you some extra resources, so that if they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do the Bevy lesson, is there anything that you can do to help me? You can pull out some sticky notes that we let you print from our website, and you can say, here, try these. So we're really trying to give you a little bit extra resource. So don't share your password with the teachers. Use it as your own resource. And then once you get your kits and your welcome packets, which they have not gone out yet, you will, in your packet, get either a coach letter like that will have both the teacher and coach passwords for the website, or the teachers will get one that looks similar to this that only has the main website. And it will be in an FCRR folder with, you know, information about the project and information about their kit and all the materials included in their kit, so that they can do a little checklist and make sure that everything that we're saying is in the kit is actually in the kit. And so that will be also included in there. I'm trying to look at my Zoom questions or my chat questions and go back to the module 1-2 schedule.
Yeah, I think we had that.
This one?
The training or the coach support?
Yes, this is the one.
Okay. We also had a question about the links, about the separate links being sent. So will you when the links go out, either for the training dates or the coach support webinars? Because it's not the same as today. That was what the question was. You don't need to save the link for today's training, because that won't lead you to a coach support.
No. Okay, sorry, there's a lot happening here. Okay, so the links for the coach support webinars will go out in an email to all the coaches once we finalize the list and before the coach support webinar. But we will also start including it in our follow-up email. So after our trainings, we always send like a follow-up email. So we will send in that follow-up email the links to coach support trainings, coach support links rather, as well. Okay, are there any other questions? I'm seeing so many good comments. That makes my day. Thank y'all so much. And if you don't have any questions, just make sure that you complete the stakeholder feedback survey and finish that and submit that. And then we will see you at our next training, whether it's a teacher coach training or a coach support webinar.